very welcome to the Overlap Rugby Podcast. I'm Shane, that's Daragh.
Hello.
Two brothers discussing all things rugby through the lens of Leinster and Ireland. This is episode 122. Great, good to be back. Apologies for missing last week, I should say. A combination of work and illness kind of got in the way with that one, but we're here, and we're here to do our Six Nations wrap up this time around. It is a little late coming, but we are going to look back on all the action from Super Saturday. France obviously crowned champions, well deserved. We'll look back on the games on the final weekend, and then we're also going to just take a look on each team and check in, as we kind of do once the tournament wraps up, where they stand, what they're happy with, what they're going to be looking to work on, all with a mind to that World Cup coming up in just a year now. We're homing into view for all of these sides, so we're going to look at that, and then we're going to sign off on the Six Nations with our teams of the tournament. We have two picked in isolation, and we'll see how close they are to each other's, but we're going to go through the team of the tournament and then sign off on the Six Nations.
Absolutely, always a fun one looking back on those teams of the tournament. Those fun conversations to be had in there, even though it's pure punterism, but I love it all the same. As well as signing off on the Six Nations, we're also going to have to look back on the Rugby Europe Championship. It had its climactic week the same weekend. Georgia with a convincing, emphatic win over Spain at home in the snow in Tbilisi. We're going to look back on that game, also on the Romanian victory over the Netherlands, and then also we're going to touch on this player eligibility news surrounding Spain. Obviously not the funnest thing to hear about, but we'll touch on that as well. And we're also going to wrap up the Under-20 Championship too, that also finished that weekend. So lots to look back on.
Yeah, absolutely. And lots to look forward to as well. We're going to take a look at the TikTok Women's Six Nations, which kicked off last weekend with some great games, some good standard. A lot of teams improved. And we're going to take a look at those games and look ahead to some of the fixtures that are coming up in top level of the women's game right now is that final weekend clash between France and England at the minute is as good as that game gets, so it's all kind of building up to that. But we're going to look through the Women's Six Nations, and then we're going to pivot on to club rugby as well. We had to forego that segment the last time out, so there's a fair bit to look back on, but we're going to give a brief kind of roundup of where things stand, both in the European leagues, Top Couture's, Premiership and URC, as well as club footy further afield, the MLR in the States, or SLAR in the South America, and Super Rugby then as well. Super Rugby Pasifika has been throwing up a lot of good shocks while in our absence as well. We'll get into that and talk about some of the action there, as well as Super Rugby Aupiki, the women's equivalent, which wrapped up just last week, and we'll talk briefly about that and other things going on in the women's club game before wrapping up the show with the rugby news of the week.
Absolutely. Just a quick reminder as well, obviously, as far as how the show works itself, we missed last week. That was unfortunate. Just a combination of lots of things, really. A bit of illness, bit of busyness has meant that we haven't been as diligent as we'd like to be on the uploads, but nevertheless it was a lot of fun bringing you all of the Six Nations reviews. And so we do have kind of a call out to you guys as well at this point. Like we're over the next number of weeks, we're kind of probably going to put the show out maybe once every fortnight, that kind of time, keeping touch and base with all of the rugby that's going on. There's a lot to watch, a lot to take in as well, but predominantly this show is sort of trying to follow the test calendar as best as we can, and those key international fixtures are the ones that we're definitely looking to keep abreast of. Obviously the women's game getting bigger and bigger is still something that we're definitely going to keep touching base with. But if truth be told, the dynamics of that tournament aren't as complex yet as sort of some of the men's game, where there's so many competitive teams. There's one truly brilliant team.
There's a big grudge match at the very end of the tournament.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we will keep abreast of it, but I think we're really looking forward to the next test window, which isn't for a while. And so in that intervening period, obviously we can do what we're doing, which will be keeping touch and base with everything, talking about things we're interested in. And the next couple of weeks, you got these last 16 games coming up in Europe, which are going to be really interesting. But a call out to you guys as well. What do you want to see us talking about? Is there anything in the rugby world that you're interested in, that you think you'd like to hear our take on? Is there more analysis that you want us to go in, looking back on certain teams or certain games or certain attacks or certain defences, or just any thoughts on where you want us to go with the show over the next couple of months? Because obviously there will be some good footy to talk about. The climax of the European rugby and Super Rugby will be brilliant and dramatic, but at the same time we probably do have a bit of scope to do other things and be a bit more sort of creative with what we're doing with the show. So if you have any thoughts, please do leave them below. We'll think on it as well.
We will, yes. And to answer in one of the FAQs that we do frequently get down below, yes, we are looking to get it onto other audio platforms as an audio podcast. Still working out a few of the glitches there, but that is another project for the next few weeks as well. So hoping from this week forward, we're hoping to be on other platforms as well. So keep an eye out for that. We will be dropping the audio version of the show very soon.
And be sure, of course, to like the show if you enjoy it on YouTube. Please do share with your friends, all your rugby loving friends, if they'd be interested at all. That will really help the channel, obviously, getting more people to watch it, subscribing. And please do leave into the comment section as well. We do enjoy the chat and the good conversations that we get going on the show.
Absolutely. So with no more ado at all, we are going to pivot into
about as much ado as we've ever done.
It's as meaty an intro as we've ever had. But we are going to travel back in time a little bit to that Six Nations, that all important one this final weekend that we had. And what a tournament it was overall as well. I really enjoyed the dynamics of it. Worthy winners in the end were France, but we're going to just briefly look back on what happened on that last weekend, because we had round 5, which was the Super Saturday, as is tradition, throwing up more competitive games than we're kind of used to. It opened with arguably the main show, with Wales coming unstuck at home. Wales 21, Italy 22, courtesy of just a bit of genius, bit of magic, bit of Capuzzo up the wing, bit of Padovani inside. Absolutely class. And just the kind of moments that the Six Nations is so great for is just seeing Garbisi. He was nervous even over the very easy kick that was left to him by Padovani going in there, but you could just see the weight of relief and joy just cascading over him as he kicked it. And it was great. So those are the kinds of scenes.
I mean, it's crazy. Garbisi is 21.
Yeah.
Like, how could he have that much hurt?
Yeah.
But it was there. I mean, it was there in his face, the level of pain that had been gone on for this Italian team. To go and get a win like that was spectacular. I mean, I like, they had been more competitive this year. They had been more defensively sound. They were in games for longer, and so this was more of a possibility than it had been in years previously. But I didn't see it coming. I don't think anybody saw it coming.
Wales didn't see it coming.
Wales certainly didn't see it coming. Right until it hit them, they didn't see it coming. But they stuck to it. They look much, much better than they've looked in many years. Probably as well coached. You know, Conor O'Shea had some good trickery, and they definitely had some fun games under him. But they look just as well drilled a team as they've looked in a while. Kieran Crowley, a very good coach,
and similarly Lamaro as captain, just the perfect kind of linchpin for them, just in terms of that defensive work rate. Like guys like Rutsa around him have never looked so good as this year, in working in that team pretty diligently with a Benetton kind of shade to it, where they are defensively nuts and bolts first, and that was what this victory was built on. I'll eat my words on the 3-pointer game, because they kicked 3 and then they grabbed a crucial try, and that was a perfect way to win a game like that. But like, it's only built on being a more sound defensive unit than we've seen since the mid-aughts from an Italian team, really. Just that grit and combativeness in the breakdowns, in the tackle area, completely different, night and day from what we've seen over the last nearly decade from Italian rugby.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it was very impressive. I mean, it had been for a while. You saw actually even the nuggets of it in the game against Ireland
and Scotland,
where they had 13
and
they still managed to frustrate what can be a very effective Irish offence.
True.
With those jackal steals attacking the pillar breakdown. They've got some players who are excellent at it. I mean, you mentioned Lamaro, but actually guys in front row, Lucchese before he got injured, like, he was doing all kinds of things. Then Nicotera comes in, fabulous in that game. Fischetti, fabulous in that game over the ball from loosehead. Some seriously great little athletes, a prop. They actually managed to win a couple of scrum penalties as well, which is just very, very impressive. And as a unit, they keep their shape really well. They don't overcommit. They basically do man marking on the outside and stick their one-on-one tackles very well. And the Welsh had no answer for it. They kept trying to run out from the middle of the field. Italy pickpocketed them, got some jackal steals, did it on a few occasions. Caught Wales's offensive breakdown. I think again gave away 3 or 4 penalties, as they did against England. And Garbisi, to his credit, really excellent kicking along with Padavani. I think
Padavani's
one.
Boot, he did ping the long one, and his boot on exit was very useful as well. I was delighted for him to get the dot down actually, because I think he's played his best rugby this year by quite a distance. Padavani in that back line, he's been there for a few years. He's another one who you can see is hurt by the emotional release when he gets up having scored that try. It was just, I was delighted for all those guys, and it was good that he was on the end of it. A good support line as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was so close to being another heartbreaker in the sense that, you know, they were good on defence, they were solid on set pieces, they always are, always have been this season. They were tenacious, and then in a couple of moments Monty Ioane busted, giving such energy all through the game, all through the tournament, bringing huge energy coming off his wing, busts a hole through the middle of the field. They work it to the right hand side, they nearly get in. Then just before half time they have a maul that's held up, that's where the whistle at half time comes from, just as they're trying to get to the line. He calls it trapped in the maul. They thought it was pulled down, it wasn't. Chance gone, half time. And then just after half time, again, beautiful little piece of interplay down the wing involving Lamaro and Halafihi. Yes, they put Ioane in space. He does just another electric chip and gather.
He beat the most defenders of anyone in the tournament this year, and he was in the team at the bottom. He was a freak.
And he just needed to check his run and find the inside man, and they had a try. And then they didn't. It was a super heroic tackle by Josh Adams, and so they were left in this position where they were wonderfully competitive. They were stymieing Wales, but they hadn't scored a try. And then all of a sudden, they did let Wales in. They did ultimately relent on defence, as they have done in every game this year. But they stuck with it, and in one moment of absolute majesty, Capuozzo just dug them out with a phenomenal individual play.
Try. This is it. We were going to do a try of the tournament segment and all, apart from the fact that it's just that one now, because that's kind of the fact of it. It was just such a moment and such a well executed run, and the players he beat, like taking Falata on the outside, shrugging off Josh Adams, and then getting through, and then doing the halfback on a 1-on-1, like it was just all glorious. And throwing the unselfish pass, the correct pass, and doing it well as well. The guy's a superstar, Capuozzo, and he's heading to Toulouse next year as well, so we can be prepared to see a lot more of him as well, because it seems like the sky's the limit. The guy really, really knows what he's doing in the open space and on a rugby field.
The two of them were difference makers. I mean, I thought Garbisi was excellent as well. I thought his boot was excellent, but the two of them were real difference makers in terms of giving their offense some urgency.
A little bit of oomph.
It was missing.
And Padavani, to be fair, Padavani was a link man. He was doing a lot of pullback things. He was playing 10 a lot of the time, helping Garbisi. I was glad he was on the end of it. But
they were getting involved. All three of the back three were getting involved pretty early in phases. Monty Ioane was coming in, picking and going sometimes.
Defenders for fun.
Exactly. It was the right way to get this team moving, and hence just made them that little bit more competitive. They were still a bit clunky on offense, let's be real, for most of the game. They didn't score,
and it could have cost them if Wales had shown even a little bit of humility and kicked a 3 at one point in the second half. But we'll get on to Wales in a sec. Take nothing away from Italy, and just how great that moment was, and how much they kind of deserved it, and you could see the relief, and just how that's exactly what sport is about. You can show an NFL fan who's never seen any bit of rugby just the passion in that moment, and they'll understand. And it's even without context, it's beautiful, but with all the context of where Italy have been and the doldrums and of this team, it was absolutely stellar. And also shout out to whoever had the forethought to put it to Ness and Dorma as well, and put it out as a video, because I really did enjoy that, as many did.
It was so well timed.
Perfect.
That was a beautiful little vid. It's been a moment, and it's a moment in time that is absolutely fabulous for Italy, and we'll get on to a little later in the show where they go from here. But it was a fabulous performance to step up to a proper tier 1 side,
and a winning Cardiff.
Stand up to them physically for 80 minutes, completely frustrate their offense, and then be clinical with one crucial chance and take a win and pull their pants down. That is awesome stuff. And geez, just massive congrats to them. I didn't see it coming, but man, am I glad to have been wrong on that one.
100%. Likewise. With that, we will pivot a little bit to take the gloss off, because we'll have to put our Welsh glasses on now and look at this one, and boy oh boy, it's an ugly one from that particular point of view. Literally every other part of the rugby loving world was watching it with kind of joy and admiration in their eyes, but as soon as you put the Welsh lens on, God, this was ugly from. I was going to say from the opening whistle, but even before.
Oh no! From the moment the team was named.
Yeah, with Alan Wynne-Jones in there, just as the Locks had started finding a bit of form in the previous week against France, having struggled all week or all tournament, they kind of break that up to give Alan Wynne-Jones a 150 caps, and
they picked a team to fundamentally change how they were playing.
You drop Liam Williams at the same time because you want to kind of teach him a lesson or something, I guess, behind the scenes, but. What the net result of that is that suddenly the spine of your pack is different because Alan Wynne-Jones is in there. The back three goes from just nearly infallible in the air in every setting, like nearly the best in the world at it, to just fundamentally flawed in nearly every exchange and finding difficulty in every 50-50. And McNicholl had a pretty poor game from fullback, but it was just some of the hubris of those selections, and then some of the hubris of some of the decisions throughout the course of the game, even as it wasn't going well, like even right up till the death, they did not see that try coming, and they fundamentally believed, even with the infield box kick that led to it with so little time, like as well as turning down the three that could have iced the game beforehand, like just the raw hubris of, like, they assumed they were going to stutter and kick and scream and turf passes all day long but still have it amount to a winning bonus point margin, and that's what they thought, 28 something, they'll get away with it. And it's like you could see it in every facet of play, and it was very dumb and disconcerting, and not something you'd normally associate with Wales. Like when I say hubris, it's like it's something you could sometimes see other teams being guilty of, but Wales tend to have a humility about them. But it was an unusual
them home in games like these. But you know, it was bizarre, especially from the offensive end. Like from a stylistic point of view, like I think we flagged it, like we glossed over it probably as the Welsh coaching staff did in our preview. Thinking, the matchup here, Italy, they ultimately relent and Wales are good enough that they'll get themselves home. But the reality is that their offense had been struggling, and that they had picked a team that didn't have the quality in the air, without Liam Williams in there, didn't have the quality in the aerial game to stack up and make up for that bad offense and give them that go forward. And so like they picked a team to try and run the ball. They had Johnny McNicholl in, by the way. What an awful performance from him. It was pretty bad. They had Halaholo and Watkin in the midfield. It was a team, and Tompkins to come in. It was a team that was designed to run the ball. And
they turfed many a pass in that first half. Well, they fizzed one out in front of Reece Salmon at one point.
They turfed many a pass, but if they'd watched Italy in the recent weeks in the game against Ireland, when Ireland, you know how much Ireland like to move the ball from their own half, and Italy frustrated them, they got in, they jackled the ball, and that was with 13. There was danger there for Wales, and their offensive breakdown, my God, it is horrific. It's true. It's really bad. The amount of penalties they've given up on the offensive breakdown this year, shocking. Shocking.
Well, there's been a fair bit of rotation in their back row as well. Sure, it started
completely uncoordinated and out of sync, the whole offense. Sorry, I keep talking over you. But
no, it's true. You're not wrong. They were a discombobulated offense compared to a very clinical one this time last year in the Six Nations, and it was just it was pure hubris that thought that they could maybe run in some tries without really changing too much, apart from some crucial personnel, and therefore without kind of realising it, the whole kind of DNA of their team was altered a bit, and they couldn't quite just dial in anything. They couldn't get anything off. Like Josh Adams did score a very nice try himself, but it was individualistic stuff that was happening that was bailing them out. And
Watkin too, but I mean they ended up with 3 tries, but they say butchered so many. I mean, McNicholl with that left-handed pass to the toes.
It wasn't just him. I think Halaholo, or was it Halaholo? No, it might have been Watkin through another turf for like a few minutes after that as well.
The one to Reece Salmon, where it's early in the game and you want Reece Salmon on the board, and it's like near enough a 2-on-1. If he fizzes the pass to the breadbasket, Reece Salmon scores, and he just chucks it onto the toe. Really, really poor, and they were like that all day. They were completely out of sync, as they have been all year. I mean, they were hoping that it would come right. They were hoping that the Italian defence would be a drop-off in intensity from other defences, and it wasn't, to Italy's credit. They were as tenacious as a lot of these other defences, and as such, even though Wales had 3 tries, they gave up so many penalties by trying to move the ball in their own half, and that's what got Italy into the game and got them on the board with kicking consistent threes and basically staying ahead.
Well, this is it. Like Wales, even when they had that did put themselves in that position in the second half and managed to win a penalty and didn't show the humility to kick that 3. They kicked to the corner again and then messed it up. And their offense was a higgledy-piggledy mess throughout the tournament, you're right to point out, but throughout this game as well, and they never really engaged with the thought that they might lose the game right up until the point where they lost the game.
Yes.
That was the bizarre thing. There was no, and for the amount of caps that were on there and the amount of experience there, that
there was
they didn't check themselves at any point in the game.
Such an outpouring of emotion after Josh Adams' try on like 72 minutes that felt like the winning of the game, but it was still a one-score game.
They didn't ice the game, and they were to refuse the opportunity to ice the game as well. So it was a strange and very very ugly picture from a Wales point of view, and it turns what was already a disappointing title defence and tournament campaign into a bit of a disaster, to be honest. It's hard to sugarcoat what has happened, because like even in the domestic game, the Pro 14 now, the URC now, the SAFA teams are coming, and it looks very much like none of the Welsh are going to be involved in the business end there. None of them really with anything to play for in Europe either a lot of the time, and it's like, where is Welsh rugby? And those are all the looming thoughts that linger when your last game in the international window was an untimely home defeat to Italy that leaves all those demons up in the open. If only they had managed to counter in for an ill-gotten or ill-deserved bonus point try, all of that might have been under the rug, but as it is, it's out, and it's for the picking at, and it's unfortunate. But one touch of class that you do have to mention is actually shout out to Josh Adams, who showed a bit of the spirit of what the game is about when he was handing his man of the match medal to Capuozzo in the aftermath. I thought that was a bit of class from a gentleman, how to handle a defeat, and a kind of an example of what the game is so good, what's so good about the game, I should say. Yeah,
no question. Fair play to Josh Adams. But listen, there were other games that it was a moment of magic and one of the most memorable moments of the whole tournament. But it was in the role of curtain raiser on this occasion, because there was some silverware to be played for. Starting in Dublin, on Saturday afternoon, the middle game, Ireland played host to Scotland, and it really got the job done easily. 26 points to 5. Didn't play their best game, never looked in threat.
Triple Crown winners,
Triple Crown winners.
Not to be sniffed at. It's a rare enough thing, because the teams are all pretty good, despite what they were trying to show us on the last weekend. But it was a good achievement for Ireland. It was the flattest atmosphere of all three of the games, and it's weird to say, even though there was silverware on the line and silverware was won, it was because of just the nature of the way the contest went. I guess
I was yelling. I mean, I was trying to get things going. It was
comparative to history made in Cardiff and then Grandslam in Paris. Didn't quite had the same energy.
No, and it was weird after the game. There wasn't, like, I've seen Leinster win trophies before, and there's a bit more fanfare, but there really wasn't. It was kind of bizarre. The little period, they cut off the interview on the big screen with the match winners to play some ads, and it was just very weird. Didn't feel like a trophy atmosphere, and then everyone was kind of waiting on England, so we all went out to watch that game and got disappointed. But the game itself, from an Irish point of view, it was impressive. I think the campaign was impressive.
Averaging 2 tries per half per game, which amounts to 4 tries and a bonus point win in the games that they win. It's very good, even when you're coming away from it. And Irish media is still kind of playing catch up with it, because they keep putting up, like, literally at half time in every game, despite the 2 tries, there's always like this montage that's just like sloppy or inaccurate Ireland, and there are errors and drops and stuff, but it's like, is it sloppy or inaccurate, or is it just they're trying things and it's not all coming off? It's probably a combination of both, but they're still winning the games and doing it well.
It's much more sloppy and inaccurate than the offense was under Joe Schmidt, and it's also more effective. It's less accurate, it's more sloppy, and it's more effective because they're trying things. They're trying to play football, and to Scotland's credit, Scotland really frustrated them on the offensive end. They were kind of non-committal. They were waiting for the pass. Ireland didn't sit them down with those inside carries, and they started to, actually, when they were at their most effective, when they did just run straight and front up and charge through the contact, and ultimately did see them home. Scotland played them in constant penalties. It was easy. It was easy exits, easy contacts.
It's been a theme of their whole tournament, really, their whole campaign. Not just the penalties, but like ill discipline in general, in the more macro sense than just the penalty count. Although the penalty count was pretty steep as well for Scotland. But they had moments like it was that moment. It was Stewie Hogg, the one that was much talked about, gliding through, nice little fly hack on, gathers the ball, has the chance to do what Capuozzo did so well, which is just stick the pass inside immediately, and there's a try. Chose not to, probably underestimated Hugo Keenan a bit in the doing of that, and got himself smashed into touch. And yes, he's right to say, like, in Hogg's post-match presser, he's talking about, like, oh, well done, you zero in on 5 seconds of a little moment of an 80-minute match and think that means something, and it's like, oh, well done. And it's like, well, kind of yes. For Scotland specifically, you're like, yes, you zero in on those 5 crucial seconds when the games are won and lost rather than the other ones.
No, I mean, indeed, like, they I mean,
that was the closest the game got to, like, because at that point it was 14-5, and had that gone in, then it's a 1-score game, and that was the closest moment it got to a bit of tension in the air and a bit of pressure on Ireland. But from that missed on, that's why it was such a pivotal moment. Ireland, the pressure valve released, and they cruised
that's
to
why
victory.
it's kind of difficult to talk about Ireland in the context of this game. We know a lot about Ireland. The offense looked good. Gibson Park, I think, still played a really good game, and so did Murray when he came on. The tempo they're getting from 9 is actually excellent at the moment. They're getting their hands free out of the contact, and Josh van der Fleer's try and Murray's try were very similar in that way, tying up the Scottish forwards in a big carry, getting the hands free, and then the next guy with a dynamic carry just goes through that space, and that was ultimately how they broke down the Scots. Just a bit of physicality and then the offload to finish it. Very, very impressive. Liked the way Sexton moved the ball. Loved the 50-22, even though it shouldn't have counted.
50-22, but look how happy he was after kicking it.
Yeah, I mean, he sold it. He did sell it. That's true. He sold it. That was 50-22, but it was a lovely kick, and a try ensued. And just generally, it was the Reds. The red zone offense got the job done, even when the midfield offense was a bit stuttering. They have, like, we'll touch on Ireland again. They were good. They were firmly second best though in this tournament. They have some things to work on. Definitely. But that said, the fact that they're just an offense by volume at the moment is no bad thing, and they're getting lots of tries in. It's true. And they were at arm's length, like they always are for some reason against this Scotland team. They never worried about them physically. They were never made to worry about them physically, which is why you do have to circle back to Scotland when you're talking about this game. Because even watching it back, I mean, like, my first thought as an Irish fan was like, geez, these Scots are playing well, because they were frustrating our offense so much. And it's true that Steve Tandy and the defence did, like, a really good job.
They presented a different picture from the soak and jackal that had normally been in during the Schmidt era, that what they've been going to. They managed to paint a slightly different picture from that, and they did get some dividends on the penalty count for it initially.
They listened to my tip of attacking the pill. They did that everywhere. They attacked it in the contact, they attacked it on the ground, and they also didn't respect the initial ball carrier of Ireland, which was something that Ireland had to adjust to. But the guy in the pivot position with Sexton running behind him, they very often, the Scots knew when that ball was coming, and they weren't overcommitting. And Chris Harris and co were just, like, ready to make that tackle, but as soon as the ball was going off to the next guy, and really frustrating the Irish defence in that way, holding their width throughout, not allowing any line breaks or any sort of clutch or sort of defence breaking carries to get in against them. And that element of things was very good. But on the other side of the ball, they were depressing, and, like, they conceded a try. They kick off, and Darcy Graham, bad mistake, hits a guy in the air. They were full of those bad mistakes. Just every time they got up, every time they had a chance to do something, they made a really sloppy mistake, gave away a really sloppy penalty, like unnecessary stuff. And it was just a sign of a team that was completely out of sync. And that was the reason they were never in the game, is because they never allowed themselves to get purchased, because every time they looked like they were going to get purchased, they made some kind of a really basic mistake, gave up a bad penalty, and then were right back down defending. And it doesn't matter how good your defence is, if you're going to spend the whole game doing that, you are going to concede 4 tries.
And that's ultimately where it ended up. And it speaks to the point I was making about ill discipline is one of the things that just springs to mind with Scotland. But it's not just the fact that they had the most penalties conceded in the tournament, which is a fact, they did, but also just things like Hogg not throwing that pass, things like the cloud that was surrounding them going into this, where a few of the lads did head out after the Italy game the week before, and it got into all those kind of news cycles, and then they had to deal with that, and then Hogg's a bit frosty in his post-match presser, obviously having lost and doing all that, and it's just all of that speaks to just the ethos being pretty terrible. And then you have Finn Russell coming off the bench because you had to drop him to teach him a lesson, but only half drop him because you still need him, and it's a tough position for Gregor to be in, because he does need some of these key men, because they don't have
they improved instantly there when Finn came on. To be honest, he generated a line break by taking the ball to the line. Also on one of Ireland's many free plays, he actually picked Sexton off, which is not something that's happened to Sexton very often, but he shot out of line and read the pass, and he's a very he's their best offensive player, and their offense generally needs to be more dynamic and better off set piece. I mean, they had 1 or 2 set pieces in this game where it was like a truck up and then slow ball, and that's just not what you do against Ireland at all.
It's true. They looked a discombobulated mess, to be honest, by the end. But it's a matchup that it is bad for them, but it needs addressing at some point soon, because as we were highlighting, we're in their World Cup pool, the Springboks are in their World Cup pool, and the last 2 outings against either of those sides have not gone very well for Scotland at all, and just the tournament as a whole then kind of leaves a sour taste in their mouth, because it was one they really did fancy and they were in contention, and they didn't really fire a shot. In terms of it was week 2 when ultimately their campaign was scuppered, and on the final weekend in Dublin, with a point to prove in that they need to perform against this green machine at some point, and they didn't do that either.
No, they didn't take the game to Ireland at all. No. They defended well and ultimately relented, and that was not good enough from a team that wants to be competing at the top level,
and probably should be, because the personnel they have are top level, but it's a top 2 inches thing as ever it is with Scotland. But sure, look, that was the kind of middle ground of the Super Saturday. It was Triple Crown champs Ireland, and delighted to be thus as well. Like, it was good scenes in the evening after, and
we all headed to the pub to watch.
Well, apart from Johnny's kids who came on to watch him lift the trophy and all that, all of those are good historic moments, and Irish rugby's in a healthy spot. But we did filter out, turn our eyeballs and put on our England hats for a rare old time when most of Ireland was knuckled down to try and cheer England on in Paris in Le Crunch, which I must say
even despite the fact that it would have won us the Six Nations, genuine support for England was actually embarrassingly low, or depending on your point of view. I mean, most people were cheering for France, to be honest.
Well, certainly by the end of the game I kind of was, because they deserved it.
They were so much better than England. I mean,
25-13 it finished. It could have been more.
They were just fine. I mean, the atmosphere was brilliant in the Stade de France. But once the game started, they were just so comfortable in the exchanges. They were brilliant. They were winning the contact areas. England were second.
As soon as they knuckled down on that first scrum as well, you could see that England's kind of half of the not that they expected to be as dominant as they were the week before in Twickenham against Ireland, but they definitely kind of hoped that they would be. And you could see that hope dwindle after the first couple of engages, and then slowly but surely their ins just got reduced, and France were so confident.
It was game over at 8-0 really. That was the thing that France needed to do, was get that early score,
which they've done all tournament long to everybody, and they did it to England as well.
It was a beautiful score. It was really well constructed. They were winning those contacts, and again, some of the work they've done in the contact area is excellent. The little dynamism, like Dupont is obviously a microcosm of it, but you see Cyril Bay doing it in that move, and actually some lovely distribution from Ntamak, just picking the right passes on a couple of occasions in the build up to that try, getting to the edge, and then some on the flip side, some very naive defending from a guy who isn't a winger in Freddie Stewart. Like, straight away it comes back to bite them. He comes flying out of line on the edge, and Ntamak just fakes and then goes over his head. They break the line that way. But there's also another couple of great moments, like Villiers stuck his hand out and sent Itoje flying after the ball, and then comes back and pops it in behind him, and it was like those little plays were beautiful, and they just kept building, and then eventually got in on the outside, and England were chasing shadows. Fiku gets in for a very much well-deserved try, and it was just it was fabulous. Fabulous score.
Some of Jaminet's play I really enjoyed in this game, because he was up against it. He knew he was from the selection with, as you were saying, Stewart on the wing, and to accommodate Fairbank, and a team full of fullbacks to kick the ball up. And he's quite a diminutive fella, and he'd already come out second best against the likes of Mac Hansen in the tournament in Paris. And he didn't win every ball. Like, Stewart did win a few of those high balls, but every time he went up, the whole crowd got behind him, and every time he came down with the ball, there was a big relieved cheer, and on they'd go, and it was great. And he had a lovely moment in that Fiku pass where he kind of rode a pass to the outside and let the ball do the work and beat the man, and created the outside little thing, and he's gliding around in a lovely form on the offense, and it was good to see him kind of dial in that aerial contest, because you could see it was something that they focused on and that they knew was coming, and another thing that they just diffused ultimately. Like at one point Stewart did go up and take one in the first half, and then Itoje was the first one to the breakdown. You could see it nearly working for England, but he looked right and there was nothing on, and then he turned around left and there was nothing on, and then Dupont got him, and then it was a turnover, and it was like that was kind of the picture that you were seeing.
The little men got after Itoje in this game as well. Villiers got him on a couple of occasions, actually on clean outs. They did a number on him, and England's defence was quite passive and quite reactive for the most part.
They seemed shocked by the spectacle and the festival of it all as well. They weren't ready for it.
They're not at peak at all. They were in a slump at the moment, and it showed out there. They weren't ready for the fight that they needed to bring to actually take it to this French team who rose to the occasion very impressively.
Yeah, as kind of we suspected, the challenging period was the away from home back to back in Scotland and Wales. That was where the nerves were, and as soon as they got it back to Paris with all of those missions accomplished, you could see that weight kind of lift. And from the opening bell, the opening try was glorious, but also that one just before half time, I think it was Francois Quark got that one. Absolutely brilliant finish, lovely dot down. I love what a great try.
He's got these. He keeps fooling the cameraman with his plays. He always does it like to the blind side of the cameraman. Whenever he gets a jackal steal, nobody notices. It's like, oh, France have the ball, because he's got in on the blind side of the camera and snuck out the ball. And the try was a bit like that as well. He kind of just ferreted in and then squirted in with a try, and then the camera pans around. It's like, oh, it's a try. It's Francois Cross. Lovely player. Really, he keeps making plays. The unseen plays for this team. He makes them all day, and so he gets a well-deserved try and a moment to shine on the biggest stage.
Very much deserved. There was also, a bit the touch of class from Dupont that has become obligatory at this point. What a tournament! What a captain for this team, and lovely little game icing try as well. Why not? They did kind of. That
one was excellent. Again, it was kind of England were punch drunk at that stage, trying to deal with France in the contact and getting nothing off. But I mean, it was defensively very, very sloppy. Like to just
allow them around.
No, it was the fact that like two of them peeled to the open side as Aldred picked, or two of them peeled to the blind side, the kind of same way side, and Aldred picks against the grain. And they're so slow to react, despite the fact that Dupont, who somebody should be tracking 100% of the time, is coming beelining for a support run. They just kind of turn and look, and then Dupont gets the ball, and then they start running, and it's like way too late then.
I think that does go to, I've mentioned it before, but it's one of the things I don't like about just England rugby in general, is that they call those guys on the left of the ruck guards rather than pillars, which is what we say here, and you can see that in those kinds of plays when they do fold at the wrong time and they do go walkabout, because guards go walkabout. Like the idea of pillar is that it doesn't move. You cover the side of the ruck,
either side of the ruck, and they don't move until the ball goes outside 10.
Especially when a guy like Dupont is at 9 and a guy like Aldred's following him. Like, how can two guys run away? But guards can run away. This is just a semantic point that I don't like about England rugby, that they do that. But take nothing away from the opportunistic eyes of both Aldred and
they were probing at that stage. It felt like they were going to find a way.
If they were punch drunk, it probably would have come on another phase or two anyway, either way. But really, really good. Credit to Marchant for England for firing the only shot by pulling that lovely line in off first phase that got them to go forward, that ultimately yielded their only try.
It's their most dangerous play, is his line. It was a similar kind of line that cut the Springboks open. I don't think they should give up on Joe Marchant. He was great against Ireland. He was good in this game, even though they were going sour on him after a poor opening to the tournament. I think he's a really fine player, and in the absence of Tuolangi, he kind of can make up for that by cutting a lovely line, it's a huge part of their offense that's missing. It was a lovely little sleight of hand as well from Marcus Smith. The timing on the pass to Elliot Daly the next phase was perfect to open up the French defence, left Fiku chasing shadows on that occasion. Daly finds
a little glimpse of what maybe Eddie Jones is talking about in terms of where the offense can go.
The talent is there. We know the talent is there, and then in other moments it was just demonstrative. Like every time they tried to up the tempo when they had the ball, they were just out of sync. Over the place. They were trying to run a screen at one point where Stewart was the in behind man and Marchant was trying to cut that line off Smith, but Marchant just came like a bit late, and Smith had the ball for a bit too long and didn't ultimately find him, and then Stewart was kind of languishing right next to Marchant, and so Marcus Smith ended up taking up, and what you ended up seeing was like Marcus here, Marchant here, and Stewart here, and they were all bunched in a little threesome, and it ended up being Marcus taking it into contact, and it
was that the plan?
Exactly. Whereas when they're at their best, this English team are so in sync. Everything is perfect. The timing of those runs are just immaculate, and that's what we're missing at the moment. And with that I think it'll come in time, but that they were not going to be competitive in this game without that ability. But they scored a nice try.
They did score a nice try.
Kept it interesting for a time.
Yeah, but that's true. Certainly kept us going, like, maybe, but probably not.
Yeah.
And to be honest, France put a bit of daylight then at the very end by just demonstrating they were superior in this and in the tournament in general, and deserved Grand Slam winners. And first time in, was it 12 years that they've lifted that trophy, and more power to them. They absolutely deserve it. They're a good young squad. They're playing some lovely rugby, and they managed to ice it in good style in front of their home fans. And then the light show ensued. By comparison to the Aviva, our paltry little atmosphere afterwards, there was light shows, there were flames up, there were fireworks above the stadium. It looked great.
The noise when Dupont ran in was
that's
fabulous.
The French definitely do rugby atmospheres. We're not going to dispute that. And credit to them. But we are going to pivot on and keep talking about them, I guess. But we're going to pivot on to a slightly different segment where we're just going to kind of look at where things are, I guess, overall. Like the Six Nations tournament itself finished as is, France on top. With a comfortable margin of victory. Ireland making it interesting by grabbing a load of bonus points, which we did, staying in relative close touch, but not actually quite there.
If it had stayed on, if there were no bonus points for Grand Slam, Ireland would be within a point of France. Yes. But as it is, France with those bonus points well ahead, clear out in front. Ireland second, then England a further 11 points behind Ireland.
That's the story, really, isn't it? The margin.
It goes England, then Scotland, then Wales, then Italy, kind
of a worthy enough kind of sequence, just given the way the tournaments went. The margin between second and third is probably one of the more telling stories that has come from it.
I think so, because this time last year you had a situation where you had five teams that we felt were truly competitive with one another, and we didn't feel like there was a lot between them. Wales came out on top, but France, England, Ireland, Scotland, they weren't too far behind. And now this time you have there's some loose chat about a big two and the three sides from sort of mainland Britain left to ponder. I don't think there's...
Stuart Barnes had the temerity to say the European big two, referencing Ireland and France, and conspicuously omitting England and its massive player base and many professional leagues.
The big two, please. One of the other interesting things, so that was interesting, just that I suppose it was inevitable that between that competitive pack, some teams were going to pull away and some teams were going to falter, and perhaps it was predictable in some sense that Wales, Scotland and England weren't going to have it their way this year. So that dynamic was interesting. One of the other dynamics that was interesting is last year was all about offense. It was all about set piece offense, opening up teams, and this year, funnily enough, a lot of teams not loving the ball and a lot of teams not attacking that well off set piece.
True. It was the first. It was cited. It was on and off the ball interview, but actually, it was statistically the first time in Six Nations history that more tries originated from open play than from set piece, by a ratio of I think 51-49 or 52-48. But very, very close. But it's the first time ever that the ratio has been thus. I think they categorise set piece as the first three phases, and then beyond that you're in open play. So there are a few tries that do launch from set piece and then score ensuing. So that's kind of the grey area there. But no, with the exception I think of Ireland and England, all teams managed to get more tries from open play than they did from set piece. And the other little tidbit was there were no maul tries in the whole Six Nations. There were a few that came from the maul, but they all peeled. No maul crossed the threshold for 5 points, and no penalty tries either. Another bizarre dynamic to the Six Nations this year.
There you go, and it's probably an indication that teams are better defensively. It's definitely flipped that way. How many teams in the Six Nations are better offensively than defensively? Not many. I think France aren't. France's defense was the backbone of their campaign. Wales, their defense was pretty good in this campaign, but their offense cost them repeatedly. Scotland defended, I think, quite well again with Steve Tandy. Offense stuttered. Outside of that one Darcy Graham break in the opening game against England, we didn't see those 10s set piece moves, and we needed them, or they needed them. Then you've got Italy, who last year you would have said, your offense is better than your defense. Your defense is wojus and your offense can get stuff off. This year, not at all. Defense, the backbone. And so really it's kind of the odd one out is Ireland.
Well, Ireland, but they improved both offensively and defensively.
Their offense is better than their defense, though. They're probably the only team in the competition.
Well, it's showing a good offense is a good defense, because if you spend all the time holding the ball and attacking, then you don't have to defend as much. It's the opposite of what Argentina were up to in the
That's
Tri Nations.
exactly right. It's Ireland's best strength is the fact that they aren't kicking the ball at the moment, and they're confident gaining yards, attacking from deep, and it just gives them more opportunities.
True.
But anyway, that's just one of the dynamics that's interesting. It's always curious to see who's winning between offenses and defenses and competing philosophies. But I think now we're gonna pivot on and just sort of look at each team take a brief look at where they stand now as the test window goes on ice.
Yeah, and we're going to start with France.
Yes, Le Champions League with the Grandslam winners. I mean, obviously, this is a good news story at the moment for a team that last year was, actively throwing games away when they had a chance of winning silverware.
Yes, that's true.
In bizarre ways, like with Brice Toulon against Scotland and the antics against Australia. It was a consistent theme of craziness from them, and to then show up on the biggest stage and just arm in face of England for the whole game to dig out a big away win in a tough game against Wales with their defence.
And they absolutely put Scotland to the sword away from home, where Murrayfield can be tricky to go to. They demonstrated championship credentials throughout their whole campaign. And obviously it felt like a decider in round 2 when they met Ireland, and as it kind of turns out on the table, it looked that way, it felt that way. Best game of the tournament, and they came out on top, and they did it in a very French way by setting the tempo, setting the tone early, something they succeeded in doing in every game this time, stamping their authority on it with a try, take the lead, let's go. And that affords them a little bit of time to get a breather in the middle kind of third of the game, so that they can go again towards the tail end and close them out.
They weren't working too hard, they weren't ever chasing the game, they were striking in key moments, be it off kick return or off set piece. They were launching and striking, and then going back to playing a defense first game
with such leaders like Fiku. Like they have such strength and depth, but it feels like Fiku is a fulcrum in that defensive unit. And he's kind of, you can see he's the deputized leader of that defense, and he's kind of the voice of Edwards based defense. You can see him kind of marshalling things and marshalling the troops, and having guys like Dante, who's an absolute rock inside him, kind of operates similar to the way Delende Am works for the Springboks in terms of just shutting down so many avenues for teams to attack you in, and then having ferocious acumen at every breakdown. And it's just across the park. They're just their ethos, their whole team dynamic is very clear now, and they do go after breakdowns. They throw their weight around and they disrupt you at every given cause, trusting that guys like Fiku can shut down the outside. But even when they're committing numbers to the breakdown, they want to make it a scrap. They want to make you kind of scrap for every ball, have slow ball, and then they want to strike when you get a little loose and drop it. Yeah, absolutely. And they still have all of those explosive capabilities on offense. I mean, the defense, yes, it was brilliant. It was the fulcrum behind which they sort of were able to win this tournament in many ways, and we know how good the Edwards defense was, and it was even better this year than it had been. True. In terms of its shape, in terms of the powerful counter-rucking. But one of the things that I think was most notably improved, and it was everywhere, it was all over the pitch in every player, was the successes that they were having in the contact, be it on defense, on offense, or in the breakdown. Anywhere, every time they were engaging an opponent in a contact area, they had a hustle about them, they had a technique about them that was winning them contacts. But like even obviously Dupont is your classic example, little man, and he's always had a bit of that, like where he'll just swivel his hips and get away from players. But even like that game against England, it comes to full circle where they're just doing it routinely to class players. They're slipping off a Toji, be it Cyril Bay or Gavin Villiers or whoever it is finds himself one-on-one, whether he has the ball or not. They were winning those contacts. And it was often with little judo maneuvers where you're actually playing a bit of arm fighting, getting in on top of someone, playing a bit of hip fighting, getting away from someone. They were consistently getting on the front foot of contacts on both the offense and defensive side. It's something they've clearly actively been working on. Post contact meters on either side of the pill. They've been getting them.
Or with the pill on the floor in the ruck. The counter rucking was sensational, but the technical ferocity of what they were doing in the contact sets them apart, I think, from everybody else.
And then guys like Cyril Bay, just like his capacity to engage like 3 defenders on the feet, win the collision, and get the hands free and get the ball away to Dupont with no ruck required. It was very, very impressive. And guys like Willems are trucking through folks as well. They were they were a bit of a machine, a big juggernaut, the work rate out of their whole back row. You were right pointing out Francois Quat, but like guys like Aldrit were everywhere and indefatigable as well. Woki really good in the air. Their defensive line out very, very good. A few little wibbles on their own line out on a few occasions, certainly in Wales, but their defensive acumen there, their capacity to disrupt you at scrum, at line out, even on restart, because guys like Villiers are terriers on the restart as well. Really well-rounded look to the team this year. They look very, very well balanced, but they probably will kind of need to kick on from this. This isn't mission accomplished at all. They know that they are very, very much a goal-centric young group, and it is France 2023. That is the goal. So this is just one of the important boxes checked. Is that when are France? This time last year we were doing this roundup, and the video is titled "When are France going to win a trophy?" And the answer is 2022. Six Nations Grand Slam champions, they thoroughly deserved.
No question. I think. One of the things looking into the year to come, I mean, obviously the team that stands out as one to catch is South Africa.
Yeah. And it's one that's in their firing line, because in that quarter final they stand to meet either Ireland or South Africa.
Or South Africa, that's right. And they do play them this November as well, which will be interesting too. But I mean, it's like what's interesting about that game is they're still playing quite a risk-averse style. Like they're dynamic and they're explosive, but only in moments where it really suits them, either off kick return where the team is kicking from a defensive position. There aren't too many sort of try from the end of the earth's breakouts for them. They're probably not committing enough to set piece attack, and I think they're going to have to get a little braver in those kind of games against South Africa. I think they have a great pack. I don't know if they quite match up well against the Springboks, despite how good their pack is. I think that's a different kind of level, and I think
it combines with things like their aerial skill. Like, yes, they're great on kick return and transition in the actual aerial contests, and Jaminet is a young fullback, but he's quite a diminutive one, and they do struggle. Like Villiers is a short guy as well, but the teams have found purchase against them, and that's one where some of the Springboks would definitely do it. So it's in their mind's eye for that knockout stage of that World Cup a year away. Those are the kinds of things. But we saw them last year pulling the trigger with some beautiful set pieces.
That's right. No, it's not that it's not in them. It's more that when the defence is so good, there's a tendency to lean on it because it's more risk averse. And that's like, especially in that Wales game, you saw them really lean into they were kind of a little bit worried about the game itself, and they didn't play their own game. They were kind of a bit jittery, a bit panicky, and it was just a sense of get the ball down there, trust the defence. Defence saw them home, but only just. I mean, little pass to Jonathan Davis, and Wales would have stolen a game that France shouldn't have lost. So they should cast a critical eye on that and just think about the middle period of games and how they can manage them a little better and not stop playing offense.
They let Ireland back in as well when they shouldn't have either. Like, that game should have been iced and they should have been in more control than they were.
Could argue even the England game, is the middle period of games where they do just stop playing offense and try and lean on their defense, and you can come unstuck doing that.
You can, it's tempting fate doing it that way. But it was written in the stars that they were to be the best team. They looked at coming out of last year when they were pumping the All Blacks to sign off on the season, and it's come good for them this year, and I'm kind of delighted, to be honest. It's great to have France back in the fold as far as the colour of the Six Nations and just the quality of offensive rugby we're being treated to now, as well as the good quality defensive juggernauts that we see in blue at the minute.
They look special. They look special. Really good generation. They're going to be one of the top three favourites, if not the overall favourites, come the World Cup next year. They got some brilliant players and a brilliant coaching staff. An elite team that earns some well-earned silverware, they're here to stay. I think this France team for the next couple of years. So buckle up, everybody.
Yeah, delighted for it. A bit more magic, blue magic. Love it. But with that, we're going to move on to our own charges, who finished in second overall, but did manage, as we said, to claim a triple crown by defeating Scotland on the last weekend. So triple crown champions, which is no bad thing, nothing to be sniffed at all. And despite their final round showing in all three of them, it is a very impressive achievement to beat England, Scotland and Wales, despite what you may have thought watching them if you'd only seen them on Super Saturday. But from Ireland's point of view, it was a very successful tournament. This time last year we were talking about when is the offense going to improve? Is that England game the start of something? And also, when is the defense going to improve? We need to stop leaking one or two tries every time we meet a top team. And in answer to those questions, they've improved both. pretty tremendously over the course of not just the Six Nations, but obviously the autumn campaign as well. It's been a really good ebb for Ireland. They couldn't quite get it done in Paris against a very, very impressive and very good France team, but they did come closest. As maybe Wales you can give credit to, but in terms of firing shots out there in France away from home, they didn't die wondering. They did attack them. They did go after it. Probably one or two retrospective decisions. Should they kick the three? Should they not? These little demons. But overall, they can be pretty delighted with the way they acquitted themselves through the tournament. Their acumen, they're averaging for like as I was saying in the fifth round review, it's like 2 tries a half equals 4 tries equals a game won and a bonus point, and they were kind of sticking to that formula pretty religiously.
This tournament wouldn't be as good or as interesting without Ireland on account of how they are different actually from what everyone else is doing. I think someone on Twitter made the point, and it's a true point, that the team in World Rugby who Ireland are closest to at the moment in terms of style of play is actually Australia. They move the ball from everywhere. They want to run, they want to put phases together, they run good patterns, and they want to play rugby, they want to play offense more specifically from everywhere on the field, and it's been great to watch. It's been great to watch the ball skills and dynamism of the players flourish. Guys like Dan Sheehan on the edge, just
stepping
absolutely crushing
into
it.
Kelleher's big shoes to fill in terms of Kelleher was great, but as soon as he stepped in, awesome on those edges as well. Really dynamic.
The players
like Daragh at first receiver was busy the whole time. I think the ball went through his hands more often than any other forward. He was a real pivot for them a lot throughout the tournament. Similarly, Tadhg Furlong, who was that rock throughout, and his ball skills in the open field are just tremendous.
Exactly. I mean, it's an Ireland team that's playing an exciting brand. The players seem to have bought into it. The whole country, the whole rugby fandom is enjoying watching them play, and it's effective. I mean, it's probably playing to the strengths of this pack in a way that is totally encouraging. Having guys like, instead of sort of the CJ Stand or Joe Schmidt brand of just sort of narrow carries and crashing that sees off Scotland but ultimately comes unstuck against France's and England's and Springboks and all the big teams. They're showing off their footballing acumen, which is right up there with the top in the world, the best in the world. Josh van der Fleer, really exciting back row player.
Tournament.
Brilliant tournament from him. So dynamic everywhere on the field. And the pack are being allowed to play, and they're really important linchpins in everything Ireland are trying to do, along with the studied guidance of Gibson Park bringing tempo and excitement and energy to the offence, and Sexton bringing all the wisdom and care in terms of where the ball goes and what the shape is. It works. I mean, it hasn't been perfect, but it's a lovely little shape. There's all kinds of little adjustments that they have to make that in games, that they can make in games to keep it working. And I think that probably is the number one work on for them. It's a brilliant offense, it's joyous to watch, but I think the number one work on for them, and it's just a question of reps against good defenses. I think coming into this year, we were worried that they had it very easy, and it was a question how do you stop this Irish offense? And I think we saw this year them get frustrated in many occasions.
That was a question certainly that tickled the Edwards defence all right when they were coming to Paris, and it's how do you stop this much touted offence? That's the kind of thing that a defensive mastermind like that will lap up, and they did concoct a plan that they've been upset on a few occasions, but their next play mentality is much improved in terms of not dwelling on mistakes, not letting them linger or fester, just getting on with it and finding space where it is whenever. That try against England that I think was it James Lowe's one, the opening score was absolutely brilliant, but it was just finding, initially they went from their own 22, which is something you don't associate. They didn't shape the box kick. It was a pullback pass from Tadhg Furlong and around to the outside up to Sheehan and Van der Fleer, and then they moved it infield. England overcommitted the ensuing breakdown. Gibson Park goes, okay, well then we'll attack in the short side, and sure enough, all forwards interplay before it finds James Lowe on the wing, but just really tidy work from all of them, making good decisions within the shape.
Keeping their shape but attacking the space and having the skills to execute and check their runs and run good lines in between them. Now we saw France kind of blow them away physically on the inside and not let them get to the edge. It was a tougher game without Sexton there to guide them, but they blew them away in the contact area, stopped them at source and forced them to kick. Then we saw Italy frustrate them in large parts by attacking the pill and kind of catching off some slackness on the offensive breakdown because the pack are so well spread. It requires better accuracy at the offensive breakdown. And then you had Scotland, who were sort of sitting back a little bit, easing off, making reads off passes, expecting those multiple pass plays and not over committing to one tackle. And that's something that there are adjustments for all of those. Like in the France game, they ultimately adjusted. They sat deeper. They kind of used France's line speed against them in parts of that second half and managed to make some brilliant plays happen in the Italy game. Ultimately, they got sharper on the offensive breakdown. In the Scotland game, they kept it a little tight and sat down on the carry and got them to tackle. I think the key for Ireland is going to be making those adjustments quicker and more sharply. Sure. I don't think they're at a place yet where like they could play their game against the Springboks and have success, but that's the place where they want to get to, and it requires more reps against top defences, the players to all understand what works and what doesn't, and how to do it.
The other big work on that, you're right in saying that, is probably priority number one in terms of just keep building in that direction, but there is a concern. Obviously Porter and Furlong were great in the opening stands of it, and Kelleher obviously as well, but Sheehan was brilliant in the open field, but a combination of himself, Healy and just like the showing they had in Twickenham at scrum time, it was the scrum in the tail end of the tournament did kind of dwindle off and wasn't as not. I don't think
it was ever good. Like it was kind of they were struggling against Wales, then they were blown away by Antonio against France, and then
didn't have it all their own way against Italy either.
No, I mean the scrum wasn't good.
So that is a huge work on, is just getting that scrum very good, and like it remains to be seen where it is. Like I think the props are pretty set in stone in terms of when they're all fit. The first choice is pretty clear and evident. The locks is a bit more of an interesting question. We like Tygburn is a brilliant rugby player, has to be in the team. I do feel, and we've been banging this drum, and it's like a lot of people, there's people on either side of the argument, but it's noticeably different when he's in the scrum, just how little. And it was the same when Devon Toner was there before. We'd had that concern for a while that he doesn't actually add the same heft. This is where tight head lock position comes into effect, and we're like in France, we didn't mention him, but Willems, so the oomph that he gives their scrum is something special, and Ireland are kind of lacking a little bit of that. And certainly when James Ryan took that head knock, that was kind of, as much as it was a red card for England, he's one of the guys who does lock down the scrum and get a bit of heft going. So we definitely
it's a
have
curious
work on
one.
there.
I mean, they don't have a natural, Willems style South African kind of
Henderson's
monster.
the
Henderson's the closest. Henderson tends not to play tight head lock though, and that's a curiosity. But I mean, it's hard to know exactly. It's hard to know exactly how to solve that problem. A sort of better technique. And the props winning their matchups better, so that the power can't tell as much. If you get your angles tight,
some of Eddie Jones's Japan scrummaging, low angled kind of very technical stuff.
If you get your angles right and you win your sort of arm wrestle on the edge of from a props point of view, it's very difficult to push you back. If you've your tight head turned in, like sometimes the power coming through can make it not count, but most of the time that you need to have a positive angle to make that work. And so they just need to get technically better in that area, and they'll have to work on that. Obviously, they for so many years had the brilliance of Cian Healy, and I think he's come down a little bit now from where he was. Even in size, he's just not as big as he was for a few years, where he was just an excellent scrummager. And so they are actually, it's one of the things that's gone under the radar about Tyg Furlong is that he's never been an elite scrummager. He's a solid scrummager who plays brilliantly in the loose from tight head.
And he's a big hefty man, so he's a lot of meat for, like, you have to be a good scrummager to get after him. But what Ellis Genge painted the picture of what it can look like when you do. No, that's always been true. Even when he was breaking out on Leinster, he has improved, but initially he was probably a little high and a little out, and we were kind of frustrated with his technique, and he's definitely dialed it in and improved, and he's a lion starting scrud like tight head, so he can definitely hold his own. But you're right in pointing out, it's like the big tests of France is one that they struggle with, England is one they struggle with. We all know the Springboks are out there looming for them, and they definitely have to just work on probably the technical aspect of some of their scrummaging at the minute. But those are just like little work-ons that you kind of want to have. It was second place, it wasn't first place. They're not finished. All the talk coming from the camp is about how they're not finished, they're still building. Still delighted to get that silverware, have that trophy lift in Dublin as a moment in front of the fans, have the actual fans there for the first time in a few years. So Irish rugby is in a pretty strong pretty rude health, to be honest, after this campaign.
Just another trophy for Sexton to add to his collection. I mean, it's not a bad one, a Triple Crown. It's just to add to his pile. I mean, that it's great. It's great to exit the tournament, even if you've come second, with a bit of silverware and a bit of positivity. I mean, they're a great team to watch. They have potential. they've got a bloody tough task next year, and I don't think there's any hiding from the fact that
their next task is bloody tough as well. They head to New Zealand for 3 tests away from home. That's their next challenge.
Right.
But
it's a great challenge for them.
It is a great challenge. And as far as our little kind of away challenge of the year, like, you know, winning away from home, they're 1-1 so far. They passed the Twickenham test, albeit with the help of a red card, but they passed it with flying colours nonetheless. Fell just short in Paris, but gave a really good account of themselves and made it a proper game, even despite the blitzkrieg start. So yeah, no, definitely positivity for the green lens at the minute. But yeah, massive tasks.
And so many different ways of scoring. That's
delighted.
So many different ways of scoring. Everyone on the pitch can score a try for Ireland, and that's just a positive thing.
Really good. And guys like Mac Hansen getting in there, guys like Hugo Keenan still nailing down that 15 jersey. Yeah, loads of positivity from our own charges. But we will move on, because we could just talk about them for the rest of the podcast. But no, we will move on to third place, and there was quite a drop off between first and second in terms of positivity and onto third, and it was England who managed to squeak themselves into third despite the 2-5 record, was it, that they had in the end?
2-5 is a bit extreme.
Or sorry, 2-3 record.
Well, they beat Wales and Italy.
Yes, that was it. So a positive campaign. They managed to beat Wales and Italy.
Yeah.
No, this is the rumblings have all been like it's always covered to the nth degree, because English sports media is what it is. It's it's pretty ruthless, pretty cutthroat, and when you have a contentious Aussie like Eddie Jones fueling that fire by being kind of either standoffish or rude or both, or like he's got an impressive way of verbally sparring with them and egging them on. But yes, a lot has been said about this England stuff. They to the point where the RFU had to come out and confirm in support of Eddie Jones. Such were people clamouring for his job. Just on that point of that, like they've obviously said they're committed to it. We kind of agree as well. I think that he is going to be the guy taking them to the World Cup, which is just a fact of it, because a combination of like the contract they gave him initially to take the job was so huge anyway. We've come out of COVID, there's a lot of money lost, a lot of revenue streams dried up for a couple of years, so the proposal of buying him out of his already pretty meaty contract and then presumably having to pony up some ridiculous other contract to get someone in on 18 months notice to try and rejig the team, it's just not a tenable one. So obviously they're not going to pull the plug on this just yet, but it does mean that it remains to be seen. It's like, where exactly are they? He's promising this new England. There is precedent for him kind of arriving at World Cups, having stuttered in the 2 Six Nations campaigns previously, coming good in World Cup year, and ultimately going to the World Cup with a bit of momentum and a new team. That is the plan, and we've seen it from Eddie Jones before. The quandary is that, like, he's talking about in all kinds of vagaries about, like, if we improve a few things by 3%, then suddenly this is different from that, and it's
you know what, I feel like I've seen this movie before, and it has been a positive one.
It's true. Well, it was a World Cup final last time out.
Yeah, well, indeed, this time 4 years ago, there were a bunch of English media heads clamouring for Eddie Jones's head.
It's true.
And none of them had a word to say that. They all kind of forgot that they'd said that, or just pretended they'd forgotten that they said that when England got to the World Cup final. There certainly wasn't anyone holding their hands up and going, I got it wrong in 2018 when I wanted him sacked. And most of those guys are out again calling for him to be sacked again. I don't buy it personally. He's a great record at Rugby World Cups. He's a great mind for it. He's a frustrating bollocks at the best times. This is why people get after him. He evidently he doesn't treat the Six Nations with the respect that the competition perhaps deserves. But I think he will have this team in good shape come next year. And I actually think they're not as far away as all that. I think even the Ireland performance showed that. Like, the nuts and bolts of the team, there's the beginnings of something pretty special there. Like the
scrum's good, lineout's good.
Yeah, set piece very impressive. Wiliness, they've got some really good players in there who are also they're ready to peak. Like Ellis Genge in 18 months going to be at the peak. Itoje in 18 months might be at the peak of his career. Some of these guys are going to be very special. Marcus Smith with 18 more months of footy in him is going to be a very special player. Like, even little moments like the timing of his pass for Elliot Daly for that one try that they got against France when they were on the go forward. That was just a lovely little touch of class from Marcus Smith.
Even the try he grabbed in the Scotland game that they ultimately lost, like, he was their top point scorer for a while, because he was like, even operating with a fledgling or sometimes floundering offense around him, he could put a bit of footwork on and find a nice ball.
Exactly. I mean, I think they do have things to figure out in the centre. I still agree with the selection at the moment of Marchant, who I think is their best bet in the absence of Tuolangi cutting that hard line, as we were saying earlier. There's aspects of their play that are clunky, that are out of sync, and not what we'd associate with England. They're not folding into any shape quick enough. They're not in sync with one another. Like when they're running a screen, you have the trail runner running at a different speed from the ball carrier, running at a different speed from the guy who's cutting the line, and the timing is way off. And that is a problem. They have to develop an offense for sure. But the baseline that they have in terms of their set piece, their offense, their defense, their sheer quality and playmaking ability,
their aerial skill in terms of
very strong. It's very strong. It's right up there with the best in the
game,
world.
Decent as well. Yeah, place kicking very good from Marcus in that new role as well. So
I think there's an open question for me from a coaching point of view about the new team that they brought in, the guys with the rugby league background, the offensive coach,
the backroom staff for Eddie Jones.
Exactly. And there's a question as to whether or not they'll shake up that backroom, and obviously that has to be done with Eddie Jones kind of overseeing it. I mean, there's been some talk about bringing in the guy who's going to take over from Eddie Jones into the coaching staff with Eddie Jones. I just wonder about the kind of personality who can be a leader enough that you're confident that he can take the team on from 2023, but kind of subservient enough that he can genuinely concede to Eddie Jones and let Eddie Jones be his boss. That's a unique personality who can do those things.
It's true.
But maybe someone like Borthwick to take the forwards wouldn't be the worst call in the world. But I think the offense will come. I think Eddie Jones is smart enough. I also trust him. He's done this so many times before, and
the Japan example need look no further. He can work with them for long enough, and they can beat the Springboks.
And he was grumpy with Japan going into that tournament. They hadn't progressed enough in 2015, where he was like, I want them making a quarter final, and they got the win against the Springboks. But like, he had already agreed to move on because he was so grumpy with them. Like, he times everything around World Cups, and I think he is again here. I think it would be no surprise to anybody if they rocked up in January, February of 2023 with all of this baseline flourishing, and then a great new offense with all of this talent sticking and much more synchronized, and all of a sudden they're up near red hot favourites for the World Cup.
They are one of the big three, I guess, now, but whatever. Now they are definitely one of the big guns in Europe, despite what they may say. Big ones in the world, like just their playing population alone, the quality of the Premiership. So yes, lots of new talent always there to be mined. And yes, a bit of sync issues, a bit of kind of growing pains right now. It wasn't, as you were saying, they were on a low ebb. Certainly when they went to Paris, we were in hope more than expectation, hoping to see them come good, but they didn't. They fell short this time around. But they're still in a decent place. They're further up the table than they were this time last year, from 5th up to 3rd. Now what comes next? You can point to all kinds of things. It is a tough sell when you're Eddie Jones, and you're going to antagonise the media, and you're going to have the results.
And also just watching the games. I mean, we experienced being England fans for a brief period.
It's frustrating watching. In Paris.
Like, come on, do something, but their offense isn't there yet at the moment. I think it will be.
Yeah, no, it's true. I wouldn't worry, to be honest, too much about where England are at.
Just be like, this guy
they'll want to get something off in their summer tour. Those questions will hold
them
off
weight. 2 Auss, aren't they?
They are, and like last time they were out there, I think they whitewashed them. Now, granted, that was a few years ago, but
better Australia this time.
And a worse England perhaps. But they'll want to get at least one win out there. And like if they go on the road and lose 3, then the pressure will be more on Eddie Jones. But I think in the wake of this tournament, I think they're in an okay place building, and with a lot of young talent to be still quite excited for. And no need to throw the toys out. No need to throw the toys out of the pram or the baby out with the bathwater or anything like that. I think they're still in a fine place, and they'll be dangerous come World Cup time.
Absolutely. Frustrated that Jones doesn't take the Six Nations seriously.
No, that's
the bed you made. You got to lie.
It's definitely a gripe. He's only there till the end of this World Cup. But England fans are frustrated with that, where he's like, it doesn't matter that we lost.
I did the Six Nations.
We completed
it, mate. Did it in 2016, mate.
So
you're talking about rugby from 5 years ago. Six Nations.
Yeah, it's true. Those are the kinds of things that you will have to listen to. Or think, like, what was one he cited where he was like, if we do incrementally improve over the next 18 months, I think those changes will be like absolutely marginal. It's just what is absolutely marginal mean? I don't know. So you have to kind of make do with just what you're looking at on the pitch and promises of absolutely marginal gains. It's like, I can understand the frustration, but I think England are in a relatively healthy spot.
I'm not too excited about the implosion of English rugby under Eddie Jones, as much as I'd not hate to see it. Yes, and we're going to turn our attention even further down at the table to look at the unfortunate campaign of Scotland. Yes, bottom half now indeed. They finished fourth in the end. Not a happy campaign for the Scots. Opening with
they finished with total, was it?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. Just the 2 wins, obviously England and Italy.
So yes, some silverware, Calcutta Cup, but as was the case last year, it's a long time ago now, and it's not fresh in the memory at all. And I'm closer to bitter disappointment than jubilant joy as they come at the tail end of a season that they really did fancy having a crack at in terms of this tournament campaign. It was it was disappointing. They're, as I was highlighting in earlier on, ill discipline is the one that I keep coming back to. So you keep trying to analyse Scotland from all these things, and like on paper, looking at the nuts and bolts of their team, like there's always a lot is made of the depth. And yes, they do only have 2 clubs to mine from, so depth is a perpetual concern for them. But like, not just the first choice players, but like the second and third choice guys, they do have good depth in lots of positions right now. So it's a different matter that's seeing them come unstuck. It's a top 2 inches thing, and it goes to, like, they gave away 61 penalties in the tournament, the most of the whole of any team. That's one aspect of their ill discipline, but also things like Hogg not sticking that last pass in that last game, things like the bad boy element of it, the kind of guys being caught going out, kind of flaunting COVID restrictions at the time, I think, to go out on a night out and getting caught, and then having a whole week and a whole match day.
I'm not sure if there were any specific restrictions.
No, there was a team restriction to stop them from going out. They can still have drinks and stuff in the hotel or whatever, but going out as they did, and then it ended up fueling the fire of all that. You end up with the media on your backs as a result of it, and it heaps on pressure, and they haven't really coped well with the pressure that they heaped on themselves. To be honest, and to be very frank, it's a backward step rather than a forward one, to be honest, compared to where they were last year.
Yeah, no question. It's hard to argue with any of that, and yet they've shown capacity to defend very well. Yeah. They've shown capacity to attack very well. Yeah. They've shown capacity to kick extremely well. They kick their way down the field.
Yep. Hog spiral, top quality.
Their set piece can be competitive. Like they have weaknesses like any team. They're not the best scrum out there. They're not the most physical tight 5 out there. That can get them unstuck. They can be beaten in a power game. True. As happened against the Springboks. But you're right in saying that they should be a team that's competing for trophies in terms of what we know they can do. Yeah. But it's intermittent. It comes and goes. They fall asleep in big moments, and allow them to pass them by.
They do. Then like even talking with Hoggy's chat there afterwards, as I was highlighting, where he's talking like, oh, you've zeroed in on, like he's kind of bitterly going like, oh, you zeroed in on 5 seconds, that was an error, and it's like that doesn't matter. It's the whole 80 minutes that matters. But it's like for this team, they really need to take a look at those 5-second moments that see them unstuck in game after game after game, because that's what it's about. Like decisive moments are a thing.
Chris Harris pass against France,
another classic example of like what might have been, but what doesn't follow is like not just does that moment not stick, but then the compounding of it with error after error, both errors of judgment and of execution that follow, and see them get results like that France game where they were really put to the sword in that instance. And then the Ireland game, it was a bit less brutal, but it was no less kind of already over before it had even started in many ways, and it looked like there was arm's length distance between them and that team. And looking on paper, you feel why, and certainly from their chat, from where they want to be, as Hogg often cites, it's like not what we're about or not what we want to be about, but it's like it's becoming what they're about, is coming unstuck in key moments and being quite a bit behind.
Being beatable. By the end of this tournament, that game against Ireland, they were laughably non-competitive. They just should never be that non-competitive. Yeah. They're not that bad a team, and I mean, Ireland didn't play particularly well. Scotland defended really well, and yet it didn't matter because they didn't do anything with the ball. They made mistake after mistake after mistake, and Ireland were allowed to just ease their way to victory, which shouldn't happen. And this team needs to have some soul searching. They might need to go on a retreat somewhere and really talk to themselves. I mean, the leadership group, the question is, how badly do they want it? Because sometimes Finn Russell, who's one of my favourite players to watch, who reads the game brilliantly, who came on in the game again in Dublin where he was dropped, and showed that he is a really top class player, even above who the other options are. Even though Kinghorn did all right, but he was just much better. He what he can bring that team.
But even knowing what he can bring, he was below his own par this time.
They need him to be like. Often he has this kind of laid back attitude of like, hey, listen, this is me, and I'm actually pretty damn good, and this is I break the mold in that way. I'm a maverick. I'm not that disciplined necessarily, but
Sure.
The reality is that if their top players rock up to the World Cup with that, or even another Six Nations, I mean, the point is it's passing them by.
Yeah.
If they rock up in that kind of shape to a major competition, they're not going to win it. They're ultimately going to come unstuck against one of these other magnificent teams.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's a consistent thing now. And so heading into next year, obviously you're looking at the World Cup and you're looking at the Six Nations as another chance for Scotland to get silverware before this team and Townsend and potentially Russell and Hogg move on.
Yeah.
They need to do some soul searching. They need to get together, decide who they want to be, and become a more disciplined, cohesive unit.
Yeah.
Because I do think that they have the quality. I think when this Scotland team works, when it's firing on all cylinders, it is excellent to watch.
True.
They have a brilliant defence. They also have a uniquely excellent offence. They have all the tools to do it still. In Doohan and Darcy Graham, they have as exciting a pair of wingers as anybody.
And in Schoeman and Nell and the likes, they have some useful scrummagers to lock down a set piece and strike off it. Their set piece moves off scrum are better than anyone's at the minute as far as their designs and the Gregor Townsend ones, but it's just putting it all together with that top level of concentration and desire that we just haven't really felt.
And
it felt like it was scuppered on week 2, which is just too often that's the case. We were citing that stat that it was 1996 the last time they won their opening 2 games of the Six Nations. And it was the 5 Nations at the time. They've never done it in the 6, and it's that's a long time to go without that bit of momentum, and it just means that once again, come that final weekend, they had something to play for in that it was Dublin. They're going to have Ireland in the World Cup pool. It is a monkey on their backs. They need to perform against Ireland. That is one of the missions for this team in advance to the World Cup, is get a good showing in against Ireland at the very least, if not a win ideally. But they allowed that to pass them by, and it's partly because Ireland were there playing for a triple crown and putting themselves in the lead in the mix for the competition on the last weekend. Scotland, 2 weekends out from the final weekend, they knew that they weren't going to be in the mix of the business end, and it's an all too irritatingly familiar picture for this very, very talented group of Scottish players, as talented as they've had in the entire professional era.
Ali Price in the form of his life, he's been fabulous.
And actually, no slide on him. I thought he was a rock of performance, of consistency, more so than Russell and Hogg, who had errors and had patches of kind of looking a bit dialed out, to be honest, whereas Ali Price did set a nice tempo throughout. I don't think that was where the problem lay at all. But and also credit to Hamish Watson, who managed to get through his 4th consecutive Six Nations without missing a single tackle. That's phenomenal stats from the Mish, but it's the difference in workload that the guys in the back row on their defensive end get through versus sometimes the kind of laconic look of the backs who are just kind of flapping around and then ultimately turfing the crucial passes.
Harris defends very well. I mean, their defense is okay. Their offense, both their defense and offense can be great, but they need to be dialed into the fact that it takes a lot to win a tournament, a lot more than they're giving at the moment. They have to be consistently innovative as well. There were times in that French game, obviously tough defense to break down, but some of the patterns they were running, they ran 2 or 3 years ago.
Probably guilty. I think there's a point Rob Kearney was making, but they're guilty of a little adrenaline dump mid-game sometimes, where you see them overexcitedly cheering a penalty that they just won at the breakdown, and then they'll cough it up by throwing the ensuing line out crooked or something, and it's too much of that, getting too geed up over the wrong moments.
Yeah, and just even some of the patterns that they run on offense, they need to change up on their multi-phase. I remember watching them against France, and you had Finn throwing his no-look ball, and France obviously just had it red. They've done their homework. No one's buying that anymore.
Pasifika opposite him.
Exactly.
That no-look ball to him week in, week out.
Exactly. It's tough to run an offense that again, any kind of offense on a multi-phase against the French defense. But it has to be a little bit different from what it was a couple of years ago. Yeah. You have to be consistently innovative to stay on top in this game, or to even get to the top in this game.
That's true.
And that involves putting in a lot of work, staying humble, staying focused, being determined, and actually backing up the words that you say. And I think at the moment,
guilty of falling short on all counts. I think
they are. It's been tough. I didn't want it to go this way for Scotland to go back down. I thought they were right this time last year, just right in the mix with all of the top 5 teams. Now they've taken a step down.
We were asking the question of them is will they kick on and manage to grab silverware, perhaps a triple crown, yada yada yada. No was the emphatic answer to that. It was not. It's very tough to spin this as progress in any regard, because it's another year older for a lot of these key men. It remains to be seen.
The question now is whether it's fatal or not. Whether this team that is incredibly talented can get back, dust themselves down, go back to their roots, meet up, rally, and then come back with a much better level of performance, because they have the talent to do that.
They do.
They also have the brain power to do it.
They have the time frame to get it right. We've seen the Razzie Erasmus thing, like it's around that time away from World Cup now where you can kind of start getting things going. Like it's probably a little late in the game, but it is like there's time to turn all of this around. It's not it involves, necessarily fatal, but their reaction to it is what will determine whether it is or not.
It involves Hogg and Russell and the leadership group and Gregor Townsend setting, because I don't think there's any case for replacing Gregor Townsend. I think he's a very smart coach. I think he has the brain power to get it done. But just setting aside their differences, their bullshit, their egos, and coming together with common cause to try and do something in 2023. And I think it could go one of two ways. I mean, they could if they continue down the path that they're currently on, they'll come to the Six Nations, and despite all their talent, they won't be as cohesive or as physical or as able to deal with the high level of rugby as some of the other teams, and they'll ship defeats to England and defeats to Ireland and defeats to France, and then
possibly defeats to Wales again as well.
It's some mixture of them, multiple defeats, maybe possibly with one or two wins along the way. In those games, but they'll rock up to the World Cup firmly out of favour, lose to Ireland, lose to South Africa, and then go home. And obviously that's the worst case scenario. That's what they're on track to do at the moment, and they have to turn that around, and they have the talent to turn it around. Obviously from a selfish point of view, we kind of hope they don't, but I know
it's true, and it is the ever frustration of the Scottish fans, because you kind of know there's more in the team than what they're providing on the pitch. And the same errors just keep repeating, so it is a touch of deja vu all over again with it, and like things like that Hoggy pass, like we've seen that carbon copy on that very ground in years gone by. So it's top 2 inches thing that needs addressing. They do need to take a firm look at themselves and try and right their ship and advance.
I would include Johnny Gray in that leadership group as well. I mean, his level of performance.
My question is is Hogg the best idea for captain for them? Maybe someone like Hamish Watson, just give him the badge.
I'm not sure how much of a communicator he is. Johnny Gray has captained before. He drives me crazy as well. As before, he has brilliant performances and then shocking performances. It's like Johnny, he's an absolute
hot and cold.
It's totally hot and cold player. But you're looking at
frustrated Scotland, frustrating
to talk about,
a frustratingly familiar conversation that we have to have about Scotland. We do have to have it, but with that we will move on to even pastures less green than that. As further down the pecking order we had Wales, and 5th place finish, defeat on the final weekend at home to Italy. As title defences go, because they came into this tournament as defending champions, it's pretty ugly reading. It really is. And had they managed to dig that win out, even in the performance that they had on that final weekend, then maybe some of these questions would be buried under the rug, as we were saying, or be kind of offset, or they were able to gloss over them with a good win on the last week. But with that historic moment burned into everyone's brains now, particularly the Welsh, there's a lot of questions that need answering. It was a pretty messy year all round, and it didn't start at the beginning of the Six Nations. It was ugly to the tail end of last year throughout, and the club sides are not performing well in either comp either. So there's a lot of inward reflection going on in Wales, and where is the talent? There's a lot of talent drained. Some of their best talent is playing in the Premiership, which doesn't help in terms of match prep either. But just in terms of what we saw on the pitch from this Wales outfit, they were combative, they were wily at times, but the back row being completely blown away and impotent against all of the top level teams they came against. Their offence, while beautiful and clinical last year with minimal ball, now we saw them operating with similar minimal ball and being not quite as sharp as they were, and not really able to get things up.
Sharp.
That's a generous way of phrasing it.
Awful,
they were pretty all over the place.
It's a curious one, isn't it? I mean, this time last year they had a crystal clear identity. And it was very, very different. It was diametrically opposed in some ways to what was going on at the World Cup. Where they were, it was still the Warren Gatland team. It was still Bigger and Liam Williams are the key men, and Alan Wynne-Jones and Jay Davis. And while we do play lovely offence, we can change up how we play. We lean on our defence and we lean on our kicking game, and that carries us through big, tight games against good opposition. and they were elite at doing that. Then this time last year, they weren't that team. If you recall, Bigger was trading jerseys with Callum Sheedy, who was running a very good offense in Bristol and was moving the pill very well himself. They were exciting. They did have George North in the midfield who'd come in and rattle things up, but they were striking off set piece and they were striking off multi-phase and they were running patterns and they were looking to get to the edge consistently, attacking from everywhere, riding their luck at times, but also being sharp and being the team that was alert to where the try was at any given moment, tapping and going penalties, looking for tries all day, every day, be it through kick passes, be it through chip aheads, or through getting wide into space, getting Reece Sammet on the pill in a bit of room, see if he can work some magic, keep it going, keep hunting tries. Just a team that was not 100% a complete team, was a great team in many ways, but they weren't coping that well physically. They were holding their own at best at set piece, but certainly weren't getting any gains there. And they weren't even that good in the kicking game. Their kicking game was pretty poor last year. But they were finding tries at a better rate than anyone else because that's what they were designed to do. They were hunting them. And in that model, they were quite an interesting team to look at. And they managed to win a tournament. People say they rode their luck. They'd red cards. They'd bounce enough balls. But the reality is that they were the most clinical, aggressive, offensive team in the tournament.
Yeah, their red zone efficiency was the stat that came out of that one, where they were just spending so little time for so much return in the opposition red zone, and it was great.
Players cutting mean angles off one another, some lovely patterns, and then just a great hustle in terms of getting to the line. And then they rocked up to this tournament after a tough time of it in the off season and some dipping form in some other players. But it was right back to wily defensive kicking,
defensive line out kicking.
Our best strength is our up and under and our poaching a line out here or there, or like the game against France. I mean, the game against France was like a textbook brilliant performance, very similar to their World Cup semi-final performance. It just came short and was they were one pass away from getting a win against a great team. In a low scoring, kick heavy encounter where we played pretty much a perfect game outside of the opposition 22, and then that was it. And unfortunately the offense couldn't quite deliver on what the defense and the kicking game had set up for them. But it was completely opposed to the way they were playing last year, and I'm just wondering why that is. And then they tried to go back to it in the last game against Italy, and it was totally uncoordinated, out of sync against a surprisingly good defence that completely caught them with their pants down and consistently turned over the ball. And part of it has to do with the lack of confidence they have in their offensive breakdown and the technical work they're doing there, but they're just not committing to an offensive game, and I think they're
also not committing to a selection idea, to be honest, because they've chopped and changed the whole time. Like, it was Basham after some good work in autumn to start the tournament, but then Navidi was back in by the end to try and fix it, but it was all for not, like everyone, they were losing all those battles ultimately, despite some courageous moments from all of those guys.
Faletau came in and had an absolutely brilliant game, and then he comes out in the Italy game and has a shocker. Everything about them was inconsistent, but I still think that Wales need to combine their sort of wiliness and their sharp kicking with a relentless hunt for tries. I do think that needs to be what the way
their halfbacks are wired, all of them to a man, and just the way they're built to attack like that. Guys like Tompkins out wide, if they can get him involved more, or even whoever they're picking in the midfield, they their whole backline does seem built to try and run the pill, and yet they did not manage to get a cohesive offensive shape really to challenge or stress any of the top level defenses they found this year. They weren't a match.
They managed three tries against Italy, but that was kind of
a struggle for them. They turfed a lot more than that, and under the line speed that Italy were bringing was good, but it shouldn't have been forcing the wild passes that it was forcing out of them. And just a discombobulated look for Wales. And it's tough to gloss over it. A good win over Scotland to do for Scotland's campaign. That was probably the closest they got to a real highlight in terms of the whole tournament and the whole campaign.
Well, it was the one win they got, but I mean they had one try against Ireland, one try against Scotland. 3 against England, none against France, 3 against...
And that try against Ireland was thrown to them as well. That was thrown at Basham, wasn't it? It wasn't the offence generated a try. It was actually their defence managed to gobble up a bit of loose Irish play. So yeah, from an offensive point of view, it's night and day different from the story of 2021.
Yeah, and it's not just the case that the odd lucky pass was sticking. They created some lovely flowing moves. I think universally across the tournament there wasn't a diligent enough concerted effort to strike off set piece. There's a lot of kind of these basic hit up plays, a lot of slow ball.
Yes, smash it up and then kick was a go-to strategy from Wales.
They can't be that team. They like, this is supposed to be Pivac's Wales from last year. They need to be the team that gets the edge, that stretches defences, that tests a 13 job.
Guys like Louis Rees-Zammit and Josh Adams looking a bit less bewildered and frustrated out there and looking more game
on the ball, exactly, and not in a crash ball context, but actually out there in a bit of space, working their guys into some space and then kicking on the front foot if it's not on. But yeah, no, the bigger Williams kicking acumen, it is good. It's not a bad thing to have in a team. I think Liam Williams is still very much a fulcrum of this team. They do need someone to step up and just threaten Bigger's jersey. Bigger's great in so many ways. He's got lovely... Like, he's got toughness, he's got game management.
Actually, both those guys do have a very kind of wiry strength to them. That is, like, it builds into the toughness of the team. They're very tough and very kind of difficult to shake off. They don't never say die attitude and very game in the tight exchanges. That's all very good.
But the balance of the team was better when it was trading him and Sheedy, when either one or the other of them started,
or even
and the
before
other
then. Anscombe was riddled with injury when he was just coming into good form. But they had that little dynamic briefly in even towards the tail end of Warren Gatland's one, when they were trying to transition into having a bit more of a running offense when they had a different 10 in and then Bigger in for the kicking offense. Yes, that balance just means they're more flexible. Like, by the end of Warren Gatland's tenure, we were crediting them as being like the utility or the Swiss Army knife of teams. Like, they can go into places wherever games want to be played and try and play them that way. They've definitely lost a few strings to their bow in this.
They can't find a try when they need one. They can't, like, if it killed them, they can barely find a try if they need one, and they have some really great players out wide. I'm not necessarily on board with the doom and gloom outlook. They haven't got the talent and they're not going to be able to compete. Like, obviously they're like it's not that they don't have the talent. Like, they are a great rugby loving nation and they produce a load of high quality rugby players, probably disproportionate number to their population. But there's also truth that there's like systemic problems in the way that it's being run. That's like, it was always a bit shocking what the great job that Warren Gatland does in terms of making mountains out of molehills. In terms of, like, their club form was always patchy. The Ospreys were always disappointing, even when they had that superstar world beater team that had Jerry Collins and Tommy Bowe and the Wales national team that were winning Grand Slams. And it was like, why is this team not like 3-time European champions? And it's like, well, probably because systemically they're not doing a lot of things correctly. And it's remained true, and like, they've always had a galvanizing effect when they pull on the red jersey of Wales. Like, guys like Navidi just grow in stature. All of the guys have that good tendency, but we didn't see that this year. And that's where these kind of niggling doubts and kind of nightmarish thoughts do start circling when your last game is what that was, when it was it's always tough on the last day of the tournament because that's what you have to sit with until summer tours, and even they aren't home games. So it's a long degree of separation for your fan base, and it means that you end up needling at a lot of these questions there's two schools of thought. I mean, they were poor in this competition. They have had some poor, they've been some clangers in the past, and they've come back and won Six Nations titles.
I'm not suggesting Wales are done for. That's
but I mean, where do you think they sit now in terms of under Pivac? Would you be confident that he can take them to a World Cup, navigate them out of their group and give a go of a quarter-final into a semi potentially?
For similar reasons to the Eddie Jones thing, I think that's what's going to happen. Is he's taking them to this World Cup for better or worse.
Oh no, I know, but I mean, just how do you like? They're going to be in a group with Georgia and Fiji and Australia. The first port of call is going to be to get their way out of that group, preferably top of it, and then have a crack at whoever comes out of the corresponding group and get themselves to a semi-final like they did the last time out. It's a similar pool to last time. Do you see them going as well?
But like, they definitely have the tools to do so. They'll be worrying. Like, those are all tough games. It's a fun pool, so it is. But they're like, I'm not saying they're completely off the track. We can see that they have the talent. They also have the clutch in all the opposite ways that we were critical of Scotland. They do have some top level clutch that sees them in games like that France game, where you feel like on paper every aspect of this game is going to France, and yet here we are in the final quarter or final play, and it's a 1-score game. And like, they do have all kinds of good quality, like team identity just kind of ingrained in them, and I do have faith that Pivac can get them moving a bit if he tries to, I guess. But we're going to need to start seeing some dividends on the pitch at some point soon, because like since that Six Nations campaign, it's been a horrendous track record that started with during the Lions tour, their kind of Wales A outfit getting hosed by a pretty poor Pumas side, as it turned out, and they didn't really recover from that. It's been pretty poor showing since they got pumped by the All Blacks. They
did have a defiant win over makeshift Oz.
They did have that defiant win over makeshift Oz, and a win over Scotland, as we were pointing out, in the Six Nations since. But it's not a lot, and not probably enough, despite some guys like Tompkins have improved in those interior.
Tompkins is a quality player. They need to recommit to offense. Like, they had a good defense in this competition. They had a surprisingly good scrum.
Like, they often do. Wyn Jones still a quality asset for them.
So I mean, I just think they need to recommit to playing the same kind of offensive footy they were playing last year. Try and attack from the middle of the field, try and strike, try and be lethal, try and get your wingers involved. Dude, it's boom, 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 1, 2, 3 phases, and after that you kick. And you've got to really try and stress a defence in those 3 phases. Not just hit it up, and then if you don't see something right there, we're going straight to a kick. They need to be more creative. They need to be more determined to find tries.
They do.
Keep the pace of the game high and play some good traditional Welsh rugby, which they were doing last year under Pivac. They just
does involve being more accurate at the offensive breakdown. You're saying all of these are work-ons. Set piece will be a work-on as well. But macro points, they need to rediscover who they are, and part of that is quick thinking, offensive stuff, as well as the wily, tricky defensive stuff. They haven't quite got the balance entirely right. Even in that Six Nations they won last year, they were only getting like 30% of the ball in every game, when they were like, why is that the case? And probably that goes back to some of that breakdown issue that's still lingering. So work-ons for Wales for sure, but not all doom and gloom despite it, but definitely some wounds to be licking.
Potentially a pack that'll struggle to compete with the big teams next year, potentially
true.
And
guys like
the makeup of it.
Guys like Beard haven't quite kicked on, I guess, since his Lions birth, and he was brilliant last year.
Whatever's in behind him, I mean, Beard and Rowlands is fine, but it's not as good as what some of the other teams are going to be rolling out.
That's true.
And it's the same with the scrum and everywhere else. So we'll see how it goes for Wales. I do think that they're potentially up against it as a forward pack going forward, but hopefully they turn it around and just become quick and sharp and make up for it that way.
Well, this is it.
And then lastly, we have to move on. We have to discuss Italy, and I mean, wow, this is not a negative conversation necessarily.
Indeed, to wrap up and it is a wooden spoon again, but sure, look, where are they now? They're on cloud 9. Sure, they won in Cardiff last time out. That's is absolutely class. They found Inco Buozzo, a superstar straight out the bat. They managed to find him in the last couple of games straight in and making stuff happen. Brilliant showing in the penultimate game as well, where he's grabbing a couple of tries against the Scots, but then also just a moment for the ages in that gliding counter-attacking run for Padovani's try, obviously in Cardiff. That's a highlight that they're going to take to the bank for all that it's worth. It's absolutely brilliant. But as you were saying in the review of that game, the nuts and bolts really are there in a way that they haven't been since probably the mid-aughts, looking at an Italy team as being as competitive, as combative in both set piece and in defence as that. We haven't seen the sight nor sound of that for 10 years plus in Italian rugby, and it's great to see guys like Lamaro, perfect captain, but all throughout the pack, brilliant shacklers, really competitive tacklers in there. And Crowley does seem to have his ducks in a row as far as that. The precedent from his Benetton time was to get a team that are, sometimes a little ugly to look at, but pretty solid, pretty robust on their own defensive stuff, and sometimes a little kind of static and a bit cumbersome with ball in hand, but that's the trade-off that he's making for some nuts and bolts that are in order, which is more than can be said for a lot of Italy teams.
No question. I mean, to see them just in the game was enough, but actually to go and get a win against one of these teams, it's a complete game changer. I know their under-20s have been competitive for many years.
Well, they actually had their best ever show results in the Six Nations this year. We'll talk about that briefly in a wee while, but it's like Italy rugby coming on the up, so it seems, from the underage and from the Benetton showings and now from the Italy showings.
I never personally put like a load of stock into the under-20s. It's very much dependent on where the unions put their emphasis. But at the same time, there is some competitive talent coming through, and I probably need to rein myself in, because going into this tournament, I was probably just a bit too dismissive of Italy in the sense that they're a tier 2 team. I still think they're a tier 2 team.
I do.
But I also firmly believe and want to believe and desperately, I think in the game you need that gap between tier 1 and tier 2 to be bridged,
yes,
and tier 2 teams to be competitive.
Yeah.
And Italy showed that they have that. They lost Lucchese, they lost that other hooker who obviously they lost the 2 hookers in the Ireland game. And then on comes Nicotera for the rest of the tournament, and he's a weapon as well. He's brilliant. Fischetti, the loose head, different caliber of player than they've had in that front row for so long, getting jackal steals all day. Obviously, we know all about Lamaro, Halafihi.
Even guys like Rutsa, never impressed me up until this season. I think he's had a really impressive season in this pack.
Exactly, just a bit of direction from a coaching point of view, trying to use a guy's best attributes, get him functioning in a system that suits him, and all of a sudden they can flourish. And you're seeing that pretty much across the board with the Italian forward pack. It's imperfect. It's always going to be like they're still a tier 2 team, but they can hustle hard enough defensively that they can repel a majority of the attacks that are coming against them, and that's keeping them in games. And they're marrying that with some excellent place kicking from both
Garbisi and Padovani's long
boot.
Is a good range finder.
Exactly, which is allowing them to accrue points, especially against teams that fancy running it against them. So they're putting together a very decent baseline, and they need to add an offense to it. They have some great talent. Monty Ioane, like you talk about a superstar in Capozzo, Monty Ioane is already there.
He's already been there for the last few seasons. Good. Again, he we were reiterating the point, he beat the most defenders of anyone in the tournament. He's in the team that came dead last, and he does that every time.
Not that much ball, but he just does so much with it. I mean, in that last, we were giving out about them at the start of the tournament that they were good defensively, decent at set piece, but they weren't even folding into shape on offense.
That was true.
How can you win a game when you don't do that? But in the Wales game, they without being spectacular on the offense, they made chances, and they did it by bringing energy. And it was the back three that they brought into the game to bring energy.
And it made such a difference. It's a great back three that they suddenly have now. They're playing in the form that they were in this year. No, they were in sparkling form. All three of them, to be honest, contributed a lot to that go forward. And to just, it means that, your defence can be brilliant, but as we were alluding to at the point about both Ireland keep ball, meaning they don't have to defend as much, meaning they concede less, versus like Argentina last year, kicking all the ball away, defending all of the time, and despite repelling a good 70% of the offensive sets that come their way, that still amounts to conceding 6 tries over the course of an 80 minutes if you spend all the time defending. So no, they did manage to get some reps in, some sets in, where they managed to put some air on the ball, managed to win some contacts, get some guys like Rutsa were very involved in the multi-phase and the tight as well. Lamaro, great hands for a load of moments. He actually linked up with Monty Ioane on a few occasions throughout, just to unleash him. They all have that dialed in of give Monty the ball and stuff happens, and very often their tries came from the ensuing ruck or something after he finally went down. One good try that was positive that I think they should lean into as well was the one against Scotland, where it was just a first phase move. It was, I think, the halfback was Brady who dotted it down, but it was Padovani with a little loop in the midfield and then out.
A lovely little design.
Just first phase, good design, try and strike like that.
Precious little of it in the Six Nations this year, and absolutely it's something that Italy need to add. Once you get the defence, once you get the set piece baseline, then the infancy of your offense needs to be set piece strike moves, and from there it develops. So many obsessions these days about your 1-3-1-3-1s and your pods and your forwards on the wing and all of this multi-phase stuff. But your bread and butter is being able to strike off set piece for sure. It's such an easy in when you're mano a mano.
And it's the kind of thing that they do dial in. And the maul has been good and better, and that's a credit. You can see him doing that, where it's defence has to be good, set piece has to be solid. Okay, how do we score tries? Well, the first try that we have to be able to score is 5 metres out and maul it over. Because that's the first thing before you go anything fancy like folding into an attacking shape or anything. And he is trying to work from the ground up, and you can see that in them.
Very good coach.
Very much so. He seems like a good fit here.
Adding layers is what they need to do going forward to hopefully bridge that gap. Obviously we're unsure where their ceiling is. They're good, they're not spectacular, and even their defence is kind of their defence kind of a microcosm of that, in the sense that they hustle really hard, defend really well, and then in moments get opened up and look pretty ordinary.
It's not going to be lost on Crowley or it might be on some of the Italians, but on the coaching staff that they. It was a great historic moment, but had Wales showed a little bit of hustle and kicked their three. It took a
terrible performance from one of these teams to actually get down enough to beat them, and they want to be able to be at a place where if they play really well, they can compete against a side playing pretty well themselves.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So and that is still the goal, and I'm sure that they'll be discussing that, going like, okay, yes, let's clear the champagne, but we're going like, what we can improve here, what can we do different here?
Exactly. Let it be the start of something. It's right now it's a moment in time. They have won their last Six Nations game.
It is lovely. When's the last time that was true? They've let their last Six Nations game Italy played, they won, and that's going to remain true all year.
But they want for that not to be a moment in time, for it to be the start of something.
Well, it was 2015 was their last win before it. Let's have that gap be significantly shorter this time.
Indeed,
that's going to be the message from it. But yeah, no, it's a Six Nations they can be really proud of. It's their best campaign in a long time. Down to things like scoring in the 80th minute against Scotland as well, like putting in these 80-minute showings where they're still in it in the second half. And then obviously capping it off with a victory on the final day. Even the showing against Ireland when they were down a man and they were kind of bewildered to find themselves down an extra man, then due to the quirk of the rules and stuff, that they kind of blindsided them and kind of pulled the plug on the atmosphere in that game as well. Like Ireland were a bit stuttery from that point too, because it was just like one of those weird things that happens that you have to respond to. But their response was pretty good. Like they got a lot of jackal steals.
They didn't lose their heads. No, they didn't
lose their shape. They tried, and they managed to get a lot of success on the defensive end, even with the 13 men, and even ultimately falling against a superior side. So yeah, a lot of positives to glean from this tournament, and a great historic win and moment for Italian rugby that they're few and far between, and they didn't quite have, like in their most recent victory against Uruguay that we were talking about, where it's like they didn't quite put in the performance that they'd be proud of, even though they won the game for the first time in a while. But this one, as a performance they can all be mightily proud of and take to the bank.
I agree. I'm loving it. I'm actually looking forward to seeing them play next. I hope they get a few games in here against the tier 2 sides in summer, and that'll just be fascinating to watch when that happens. But congratulations to Italy, a much better place than they've been in any of the last several tournaments. And good on Kieran Crowley, you're taking them in the right direction.
I'd agree.
But listen, with that kind of wraps up our review of each of the teams that we were looking back on, and nearly almost puts a cap on the Six Nations.
Yes, indeed.
We have one more bit of fun that we're going to get into here. Which is our team of the tournament.
That's right. I'm just going to get mine up now.
So we've each picked a team. We do this. We're making a tradition of this after each international window.
Yes.
Basically, we've picked individually a side, and we're going to see now how well they match up. And generally speaking, we agree on like 90% of the positions. I think the last time out we had as much disagreement as we've ever had, because you were bulling that Ireland. You basically picked Ireland for your team of the November series.
The November series, I did. I'm in defence of that now. Some people are critical of it, but in that November series, I thought we played the best rugby on balance, because France played brilliant rugby against the All Blacks, but they also had a pretty poor showing the other week. It was all balanced out. Whereas this time different colours to the team. But I suppose we start with props.
Yes, at Loosehead, I was so excited. I bet to myself, I was like, I'm going to pick Schoeman. It's going to be great because he's been so good, and I have my reasons XYZ. Schoeman's been everywhere, and then I just remembered how good Cyril Bai was.
Yes,
Cyril Bai
very in the lead on that
extraordinary performance. I mean, you just think back to some of the first of all his work in the contact area, his carrying game is sensational, but also just some of the clutch plays he came up with in that carry game against Ireland in that crucial game that ended up being a tournament decider. Truly. Bashing his way through Peter O'Mahony on his way to that clutch try. He delivered for them in the big moments and the big occasions. He was also just everywhere on the field, an explosive scrummager as well. The highest performing loosehead in the competition, I think, and ultimately, despite my Schoeman love and
even honourable mentions to guys like Genji, who had a good solid showing from loosehead for England
against Ireland.
Even from Ireland's own ranks, I think if Porter had managed to stay fit and gone toe to toe, then maybe he might have mounted a challenge. But I think, yes, I agreed with you. I went with Cyril Bai also. Thought about Schoeman as well, because he has contributed a lot to that Scottish scrum and he's brilliant, but it was next level stuff from Cyril Bai in the loose, in the tight, in the breakdown, everywhere. He was everywhere, and it's a serious asset having a prop like that in your ranks, and it contributed to them. So one Frenchman in already at number one. I went with him as well.
My hooker, my number 2, was also a Frenchman. Julien Marchand gets my vote. I mean, just he was one of the key fulcrum players in that defence. One of the best defensive playmakers they had. His turnover stats are off the charts. He folds into position really quickly and leads the inside line superbly well, as well as adding all the brilliant contact work that so many in that pack have on the offensive end. He carries really well, but it was his defensive contributions, his huge big defensive plays in big spots in all of the games that stood out the most for me. I mean, I'd shout out Dan Sheehan. I thought he came into the team, he brought huge energy from an Irish point of view. I enjoyed Jamie George's performance wrestling his jersey back. Both of the Italian hookers were very impressive. Who each had a starting stint, but I definitely think Marchand, in terms of contributions to a team, the defence was what won them that championship, and he was a fulcrum part of that inside defence. So Marchand for me.
I'm going to differ slightly and say the Dan Sheehan who you just mentioned, my first Irishman in the ranks. I think he was absolutely. I was close to Marchand, to be honest, as well. I was flipping between the two, but I've kind of opted for this in terms of my front row balance, because I think Sheehan just really impressed with we wasn't starting at the beginning of the season, but just the contributions he made, including that brilliant try saver in France that ended up being relatively crucial in terms of bonus points and staying in touch as well. But I thought he really impressed. The arrows were very good, but all around the park, the loose play was phenomenal. His speed off the mark and his power, as well as his decisions when to pass and when not to. Didn't once see him do the classic hooker kind of forward pass that sometimes happens when you have those stumpy arms. He executed everything brilliantly.
That Irish shape really suits him. The style of game that Ireland are trying to play, getting him in the tram lines with a man either side. He's brilliant at that. He's got a surprising clip of heel. He looks Dane Colesish.
He does. And with Kelleher to come back in, it's rude health for Ireland. Even Mo Vakpes on the bench for France is brilliant every time he comes in as well. There's a lot of good hookers on show here from those top two sides, but I went with the Irishman, you went with the Frenchman. Fair enough. Indeed. And then rounding out the front row,
you see, this was a funny one. I was gonna pick Antonio. It's actually something that you said that stuck with me, that kept me from picking Antonio. I thought he was like a savage in the scrum, and to get penalties up against Genge, who was in such good form. He was awesome. He did have that benefit of just that tremendously sized pack and engine room behind him, which always helps. And I thought that just towards the tail end of the year, he had one or two, after that superb performance against Ireland, he did have one or two performances that were a dip below that. He gave up a couple of penalties against Scotland at the scrum. His work in the loose, while still explosive and still really good in the contact, especially in the offensive end, just sitting guys down. It wasn't quite as effective a contribution as my pick, who's Tadhg Furlong. And I think Furlong obviously had that nightmare performance against Genge in the scrum, but I still think in terms of overall contributions, you talk about Marchand being a fulcrum of that French defence. He was a fulcrum player in that Irish offence. Everything that they're trying to do from a ball play point of view, Furlong is so crucial, and he carries really well, but his timing and understanding of the passing game is elite. It's really excellent for a tight end to have that footballing ability, and he still had it in spades. It wasn't his best tournament. In his best tournament, he's pushing for player of the tournament, which he wasn't quite in this year, but he was still good enough to make my team. I think he was exceptional and really helped the Irish offence keep rumbling.
It's true. I did the reverse again. I did go with Antonio, despite having Furlong in there for the most part. It was that showing against England that probably cemented it, where I was going from a Springbok definition, as much as the razzle dazzle is all very nice, and the fact that he plays 10 as well as tight head is awesome, but your tight head needs to look down the scrum, and he didn't quite do it, and that's kind of my main reason for picking Antonio. Who did very much so, especially with that England test that came to them, and Genge did go after him in the first few, and purchase at all, and it was a very impressive, rock solid showing from the big man. He's a lot of kgs to try and shift in any circumstance, but he was brilliant all tournament. To be fair, you wouldn't go wrong picking him either. And to be honest, even Sinclair had some good moments for England, and even some of the Scottish side heads did all right. Xander and Nell managed to, but
Xander was never making my team.
He was not close to it. But I went to Tonio. I went 2 French props with an Irishman in the middle. That was what I was looking at, because I thought their scrum was mighty, and as much as their defense won them the tournament, probably their scrum was a serious factor in why you were unable to repel them or unable to get purchase or counterplay against them, because their scrum was just such a rock.
No question, and Antonio a big part of that. Absolutely fair enough calls. We'll look at the lock, stocks and 2 smoking barrels now. I mean, for me, there was like the only question mark for me, I think it was between three men, so it was 2 goes into 3. If you're picking a 23, it's nice and easy.
Yes.
But it was the 2 French boyos, Woki and Willemse, who I thought were equally brilliantly competitive and sensational. Woki, obviously, he's got that rangy capacity. He was brilliant in this tournament. He makes a mess of teams' lineouts. He's everywhere in the loose. He's got a lovely sleight of hand. Comes up with all kinds of fancy plays on the offense and defense. And then Willemse, by contrast, this just heft, the sheer heft of that man. He is heft personified, and he's just relentlessly physical everywhere, and adding just a technical element to it as well. He doesn't make that many mistakes. You know, you think a big Safa lock like that, and even in times gone by when he first came into the team, there'd be the odd high tackle or sloppy drop. There's been none of that. He's been technically perfect in everything he's done, and relentlessly physical on both sides of the ball, and a huge part of that scrum that works so well for them from the tight head side.
Absolutely.
Just locking down that scrum, being the quintessential tight head lock. I think he was sensational, and he does get a place in my team. Woki has to drop out because Itoje is incredible, and that's what I went with. I thought Itoje just was, even despite England's poor performances, like even in the Ireland game, but the Wales game, just making
phenomenal playmaking.
He's dialed into the defensive turnover so well.
Yeah, I mean, in any setting, in mauls, in rucks, in open play, he's very useful. I'm not going to vary the lead. I went for the exact same locks. I went to Willemse and Itoje, and I was musing on certain things. I was like, maybe Ranger Tyburn did play well, and then Woki did play well, but it was like, the Willemse Antonio thing I couldn't break up at all, because I think they are just monstering that side of the scrum right now, and I can't wait to see them face the Springboks, because I think that's a serious matchup in that particular area. And Itoje, for the same reasons you just listed, like even in a discombobulated, disorganised England team, he looked devastating in every tight exchange a lot of the time.
Even in the Italy game, as they stuttered, like he was everywhere. Just monstering over everything.
Italy kryptonite was in that game. Totally impressed with those locks. Nothing much more to add. You kind of said it all. So moving on to the back row, where I had a kind of colourful one. I was tempted by a fair few players. I was tempted to just go all French. I was tempted to go all Irish. What I've ended up doing is go for Josh van der Fleer at 7, who was pretty much one of the first names on it, and Aldred at 8, because I wanted both of them in, and then I'm very unlucky to miss out was Croix, who was brilliant, but I actually gave it to Hamish Watson as honourable mention for the Scots and their combative defence. He kind of represents all of them there. He's the only Scot in my team. It's also congratulations for getting through 4 campaigns in a row without missing a tackle. I don't know how you do that as a back row forward. It's pretty freakish, but I thought he was very, very combative, so I have him at 6 in with those 2 other indefatigable engines.
Fair shout. I also went with Josh, again one of the shortlisted for player of the tournament, and with good reason. Just bringing an extra level of energy, reads the game really well on offense and defense, makes so few mistakes, and has himself more and more explosive play.
Both have that kind of similar engine where they just go from zero. Their acceleration's quick, and they don't slow down as the game goes on. They just keep going.
Aldred had a poor day against Wales, which they've said he was ill in that game. Outside of that, was awesome. Everywhere, all over the field. And that game, the performance against England, he was absolutely everywhere.
And his telepathy with Dupont for not just that try, but in the general in the open play. He's ferocious.
He folds into shape on defence so well. He's actually another fulcrum player in that defence on the inside, very similar to what Josh does for Ireland.
He sets the line speed. He's indefatigable, just goes all day.
Exactly right. So I have him and Josh in at 8 and 7, and I do have Francois Cross, who is my underrated sort of, kind of my flew under the radar player of the tournament, if that makes sense. I think he was
unseen work.
He's a phenomenal playmaker. Like he's probably second to Itoje in terms of the plays he comes up with in the breakdown. Like he's a savage. Absolute savage. Francois Cross, a lovely player. Just all kinds of brilliant, spoiling defensive plays, clever little offensive plays, makes so few mistakes. I think he's a worldie of a player. I think he had an awesome tournament and is well worthy of his place. So I do appreciate you saying about the Mish. I actually think the Mish was good, but he's had better tournaments. He's been more explosive on both sides of the ball.
I think Scotland in general have had better tournaments. That's probably where that comes from as well. Like their offense wasn't great, but their back row they were doing a lot of dogged work. Even Daragh I was thinking about as well, because I was like, geez, Daragh really did hustle. He's really impressed me.
He was very good, truly.
Even like Tane Basham and stuff in the early going for Wales was doing something similar from last season.
Their breakdown was such a mess.
Couldn't go to a Welshman. And it's not unusual now skitting through the back row, and I wasn't thinking of putting any Welshman in there. And that's an unusual look for a post Six Nations kind of dynamic.
It very is. And likewise, England, unfortunately, Dombrand would have been closest for me. He obviously was top in the turnover
Simmons
stats.
Was good. Like, actually, Simmons had a few good defensive moments. That great tackle on Tyg Furlong as well. But no, I don't quite think they again, it was just not quite cohesive or consistent enough from England. And Itoje is in there as kind of representative of what England can do and do well and similar.
And Dombrand wasn't far away. It's just he's going head to head with Aldred here. So he came out the wrong side.
French guys were too good, and that Irish pack were pretty good as well in pushing them, and we saw that. So those are the packs. Let us know who's in your pack. But with that, we're going to move on to the back line, and I think no suspense because we're going to skip over the 9, I guess.
Wow, go for the 9.
He was just named player of the tournament this year, the player of the
Callum
tournament. Callum Braley, that's right, the Italian. Antoine Dupont, France captain, Grand Slam winning captain, scoring his games, icing tries all the time. Is the difference between the teams a lot of the time when it comes down to it.
He's had some freakish level performances in this tournament where he's shown it's not just the relentless physicality, the genius on offense, seeing the game, running the attack, sniffing out tries. It's also the phenomenal defensive acumen. Yeah. Like he reads the game on both sides of the ball as well as anyone in Test rugby.
Has weight to throw around, even though he's a wee man on the pitch.
Surprisingly physical,
ragdoll
really
Itoje.
quick.
Just
passes crisp consistently, always clears the ruck.
Clearing the ruck is my favourite attribute of his. Is like so many scrummies, when they get scragged, they do a little shape or something, or try and buy a penalty. He fights for it, but gets the ball away from there, and I love that about him. That's one of my favourite qualities in a halfback. Shout out an honourable mention to Whiskey. Jamison Gibson Park was the closest contender in my mind to that jersey. He had a bloody good tournament, setting a tempo that's pretty unusual to an Irish team in a Six Nations campaign, and it was brilliant and worked for him the whole time.
I think Murray's form has improved towards the tail end of the year, but I don't think the great Irish offence, as good as Sexton is, as important as Sexton is to it, I don't think the offence happens without Gibson Park. He's been crucial.
Yeah.
It's a different level of tempo.
Ali Price was the other honourable mention as well. I think he played a really solid campaign from 9 for the Scots, and things went awry around him, but no one was quite as well rounded or as dangerous as Antoine Dupont this time. So he got the 9 jersey in my team, and I dare say in yours too. Yes. Probably in yours too.
Antoine Dupont was the first name on the sheet.
Yeah.
Not a controversial one.
Fly half then. 10 different gravy. I had, I thought long and hard about this because there were a multitude of options. And
for me, there were 2.
No, I went the other one who you aren't going to give it to, but Marcus Smith.
Really
impressed me the most.
Really?
At 10.
Oh, no way! He was great, but in many ways.
No. I think he genuinely impressed me most because Ntamack or Sexton, I thought the offense kind of operated even independent of them, whereas in a team with no offense at all that I could determine apart from marching, kicking, hitting 1 or 2 good lines, he still managed to grab tries and get things moving. And I just want the joy of putting him next to Antoine Dupont in my dream team and see what happens there, because I actually thought individually he impressed me.
He was certainly impressive in some areas. I don't think he was playing on the same level as Sexton and Ntamack. And you say that the offense ran independently of them. Like, the Irish offence doesn't function without Sexton. Sexton runs the Irish offence. He makes it happen. He puts the guys in position. He makes it tick. He runs the show.
So that's who you're picking?
Yes!
Not
by lots. I know Ntamack was close as well. Ntamack had a glorious performance against France in that last game. He's reading the game even better. But he kind of plays where Gibson Park plays lieutenant to Sexton's captain in the Irish offence. I think Ntamack plays lieutenant to Dupont's captain.
I think they both have good telepathy, to be fair, and actually they have a good chemistry in terms of unpicking us particularly. They have a good track record of linking that exact pair to unpick Irish defences. No, it's right, but
does the 10 not bear? Like, I know it's very tough on Marcus Smith, and I'm not about to blame him, but does the 10 not bear some responsibility for the offence not functioning or existing at all? And like,
I think he bears some, but he was the only, as far as I could tell, he was the only avenue the offence had to get anything going was through him. That's what impressed me, and that's what prompted the pick. Whereas I felt with both France and with Ireland, like even in that France game, the offence ticked through Whiskey and managed to generate good scores even if Sexton wasn't on the pitch, and that was part of where he didn't actually play in the France game was another factor in it. But no, Marcus Smith, of all the Englishmen, I thought he actually did very, very well, considering the offence just wasn't there for him. Like, it only had Malins operating with him in the first few weeks and trying to run with him, but everyone else was discombobulated. They were chopping and changing things. They were putting fullbacks on the wing and telling them to kick the ball. But no, I think honestly he impressed me the most, more so than the other two lads who played in fantastic teams.
Again, this is the biggest. This is like the bigotry of expectations. This is
maybe so.
Sexton didn't impress me any more than he impressed me in November, but he impressed the hell out of me in November. He's really impressive.
Yes,
I thought Sexton was. I thought Ntamack was great, but I thought Sexton was far and away the most impressive player of this tournament. He's a Fulcrum, like you talk about a Fulcrum player, he is the Irish offense in so many ways.
I don't know if that's
true. Man,
it
doesn't work without. Like, it's not like I hate to break it to you. Like, our offense is good, but the decision making without him is night and day compared to the decision making with him, and they just aren't as fluid, and it doesn't operate as well without him. They make more mistakes. He puts the right runners on the ball and does it consistently. He's kind of old man veteran quarterback. He knows all the shapes. He picks the right pass every time. I couldn't fathom picking another 10, to be honest.
No, I knew that you would. So for a bit of colour, I'm going to chuck Marcus in. And it's a nice halfback pairing that I just fantasise about, but it's never going to happen.
It's not as nice as Dupont Sexton.
Dupont Sexton's another one, but I think I picked that one the last time as well.
Well, here we go. Fair enough. All right, well, we'll go to the centres then.
Centres of excellence.
Wow, I'm just reeling from that.
Non-winning of Sexton that you weren't fathoming.
What country do you come from? Marcus Smith over Johnny Sexton.
Based on this
my goodness. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on. Centres, I went with. I was looking through the options. I don't think it was a great tournament for centres.
I thought it was a great tournament for a couple.
A lot of guys struggled in that position. I thought Scotland were chopping and changing at 12, didn't know what to do there. I thought the Italian guys, again, like some solid defensive play from Brex and Co.
The razzle-dazzle came elsewhere.
The razzle-dazzle came elsewhere is right. And Ireland even too, like the interplay of the forwards and some explosive plays from the wingers.
It was either Aki or Henshaw rotating in. It was
a
good tournament for Ringrose, actually.
It was.
And he grabbed a nice try at one point, but he was straightening more. He was addressing your concerns about listing to the right. He was straightening a lot better.
Yeah, exactly. Doing sort of basic stuff. But I think the two guys who stood out were the defensive unit that stopped anyone from getting outside them, that worked together really, really well. Dante at 12, there's some of the jackal steals out of him. He functioned really well in that offense and had some great offensive carries, got them go forward when they weren't going forward.
Big, robust unit that he
but
is.
It was his defensive work
his
stood out for me.
Great. His tackling is phenomenal as well.
And Fiku, the leader, for me, even though Dupont is brilliant, Fiku is my player of the tournament. I thought he was sensational.
He was the same last year as well. He's been in a fine vein of form.
He's a leader. Close to Am levels.
He's around his peak now. He's one of the older guys in that team, but he's still relatively young. Like he's starting to push 30 now, but he's a captain of that defense. I went with the exact same. I just picked the French centres because I was trying to chop them out. I was tempted by Ringrose because he was really good and maybe shifting Gael Fiku into 12. And the other one was Marchant for England, who I was like, do you know, he did impress me, but it didn't.
Marchant rallied. He didn't finish the season.
That was
strong,
what my thought was. He didn't consistently. No, it was the two French lads, and they did shut down everything that was around them, and they did. They were rock solid. Dante, very impressive. He started impressing me in that Australia tour last year, and he's kicked on. He's become a very able deputy for Fiku's shooting, and it does, like we were highlighting, operate very similar to that De Linde Am axis where Am makes the reads and the hits out wide where it gets difficult. But if they're going to be forced back inside, you have a brick wall unit who's going to meet them there and smash them and get over the ball and make a mess of it. So I went with the French centres as well, with no compunction about it. I was just they were better than everyone else this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we move on to the back three.
The back three, colourful back three that I went with. I was tossed, there's loads of coins to toss because there were a lot of standout performers and there were a lot of people who were unlucky to miss out. I thought, even in the green jersey, there were a fair few in the back three who impressed throughout, but there was rotation. In the blue jersey of France, obviously all of them always impressive, always forever. Even in Scotland, in some defiant shows, you had Darcy Graham look brilliant at times in otherwise raggedy showings. Josh Adams did well even despite things floundering around him. But no, I went ultimately with on the left wing Gavin Villiers. who impressed the hell out of me. The hound dog that he is, little terrier, was just, he was everywhere all tournament long. Great on the defensive thing, between him ragdolling Hugo Keenan or ragdolling Itoji. He's deceptively tough. Really good technique in the breakdown, which is something that a lot of sevens converted players really have, because they're used to like 1v1 rucks that are such a clean picture you have to paint. He's very, very technical and very quick, but also just like lethal with ball in hand. So I went with Villiers on the left. On the right, I went with Angie Capuozzo of Italy.
Just on a
two-game showing, stuck him on the right wing because, I think he deserves it. Credit to him.
Fair enough.
I was tempted by Monty Ioane, but I actually picked him last time out as well for Italy's sake. I'm going with Angie Capuozzo. I think he deserves it. I think he was very, very, very impressive, and I would like to see more of him. And then at fullback, I opted for, after much humming and hawing, because actually a fair few of the other fullbacks impressed me for many reasons, I went with Hugo Keenan, who actually, after a rough enough start in the first couple of games, ended up putting in some of his best showings in the green jersey in towards the tail end, and he just looks just like he's not going to be shifted from that green jersey, from that 15 jersey in green for the next 10 years probably, by the way he's playing at the minute. So I went with an Irishman, a Frenchman and an Italian for colour.
Amongst stiff competition, I do think that Hugo Keenan was the best fullback in the competition. I think he was the most solid. He is offering more and more on an offensive side. His passing game's getting more clean, his reads are getting more clean, but defensively his backfield work is
great hit on from the Scottish point of view, it's terrible hog no pass, but from an Irish point of view, it was a smashing hit that he put in to prevent that try.
Superb. And he was full of those kinds. He was full of those kinds of plays all tournament. His cleaning up of the backfield was immense. And I think he edged out Stewart and Hogg and Jaminet.
Jaminet struggled in the aerial collision. That was where his place kicking gives him a string to his bow that others don't. He's a beautiful place kicker of a ball. But somewhat vertically challenged sometimes in the aerial contest. Liam Williams showed his importance in that Italy defeat. The second they haul him out of there, they go from like infallible in the air to just fallible everywhere every time. He had me think Freddie Stewart was very impressive, but they shifted him to the wing to accommodate Furbank incorrectly in the final thing as well. There were a lot of impressive showings from a lot of fullbacks. Hogg's boot was good throughout, but on balance, Keenan was the most consistent.
Yeah, I agree. And then on the wings, if I could pick two left wingers in earnest, I would. But I was going to go with Ioane and Villiers. For the reasons you outlined. I had picked a 23, so
you were bailing out of these
absolutely.
options.
I put Villiers on the bench, so I went with Monty Ioane. And I just think Villiers was extraordinary in so many ways, and as you say, the breakdown work. But Monty Ioane, the energy he brings, and the incredible plays at him. Like, he'll get the ball on the edge of the field. He'll have a defender in front of him and another one 5 yards ahead of him, and he'll beat the two of them before he even thinks of doing. Instantly drop the ball on the toe, and for that skill is so difficult, and it's so underrated how good he is at it. He lands it pretty much on a sixpence, right where he can reach with his elite speed. Recovers the ball, dances past players. He's extraordinary what he makes happen with so little ball and so little space. He gets that offense rumbling, and even though he had that mistake in the Wales game, the reason they were getting so much go forward ball, or any go forward ball, was Monty Ioane. So I thought he was consistently brilliant with so little service. And I actually think, like, if you put him in any of the other teams in the competition, he might well just be top try scorer, considered the best winger in the competition easily. So Monty was in for me, and then on the right wing I went with Darcy Graham. I was consistently impressed with him. I think he was consistent, like every game.
There were other guys
awesome.
I thought the Irish lads, Mac Hansen and James Lowe, he missed the first start thing but came out with a bang on his exit kicking. Penot for France was a gliding bit of majesty, as he always is.
Finds great tries.
There's a lot of good wingers out there.
Between Penot and Graham, but I gave him Graham was consistently explosive and brilliant.
And even in other floundering Scottish showings, he was pretty much game every time the ball came near him. He didn't really make many mistakes that I can remember. That's fair shout. Two decent teams.
Let us know now, whose is the better team? Obviously the Smith run mess over here, or the glorious Sexton offense that would open his team up.
Yes, well, I think to be fair, DuPont is leading both of our offenses. Let's not be rude.
The genius of my team, Shane, is that Sexton and Dupont work together. Anyway, who has the better team? Let us know. What's your team? Let us know in the comments down below.
Drop them in.
Foolish are we?
Yes,
all of those good points.
Just a final tally I had on that. I ultimately, I think I went with 8 French, 3 Irish.
I'd have to count.
2 English. 1 Scottish, 1 Italian, and 0 Welshman.
I'd have to count.
First time in a long time that I've done 0 Welshmen, but I couldn't really think of any that I would put in.
6,
7, based on this year's showing, and
I'm not 8 Frenchmen for me as well.
Right,
and then Irishmen, 1, 2, 3, 4 Irishmen.
Okay,
and then just a sprinkling of the rest.
1 each from
Itoji, and then who aren't Irish and French. Itoji,
Darcy Graham's not Irish or French.
Ioane, Graham.
Yeah, an Italian, a Scotsman, and an Englishman.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, there was that amount of separation between first and second and the rest that it probably is right that there's a healthy supply of Frenchmen in this, because I had
Schumann on my bench. I had Dombrandt on my bench.
I didn't go through a bench. We probably should have convened on that. I probably would have had a similar bench. I'll go with the same bench.
Anyway, forget about it. Let us know your team. Let us know your thoughts on our teams of the tournament down below. But for now, we're going to move on. We're going to put a bow over the Six Nations. It is over. It is done. I mean, everyone else put a bow over 2 weeks
ago. But
now it's officially over.
Now that we've covered it and set our piece, that is the end of the Six Nations 2022. Huge congratulations to France. Slightly smaller congratulations to Ireland. Huge congratulations to Italy as well, and commiserations to the other lot, and they need to dust themselves off in summary. But with that, we are going to move on, but not too far, because we do have to pivot on to Rugby Europe, which similarly rounded up on the same weekend. We
are staying back in time, moving just a day ahead. Well, indeed, actually starting on the same day. The precursor to the precursor was, we were going into this round with the need for Romania to get themselves a win over the Netherlands to knock Portugal out. And mission accomplished. They got their win. Yeah. It was it was a tie game in the last 60 minutes, but Romania's early explosion got them home, and they won the game 38 points to 12. And qualified for the repechage as a result, knocking Portugal out. It was
they did their job. Nondescript kind of. You could see the stutter in them that kind of revealed it. And credit to the Netherlands, this is the closest game that they've been involved in since they've come up. The smallest winning margin, they managed to score 12 points. Decent from their point of view, but Romania, mission accomplished, job done. They really did that with that double over Portugal over the last couple of years is really what sees them in the position that they found themselves in at the end of it. And they're good value for it. It's been a very good project, building over the last couple of years, with consistency of coaching now, but also a whole host of new players have been blooded over the course of the last 2 seasons, and they look in a really good place to go forward and make a run at this. They probably are favourites for the repechage if they stay in it as
I think so. Competitive, very competitive team, very physical, obviously, as they've always been, capable of standing up to those tier 1 sides in that physical battle, and now they're adding some real dynamism outside it. I think they have to work on some of their offensive shape. It's when the World Cup comes around for them, it's going to be a bit more about putting Vavasa in space rather than him just creating space for himself,
because it's not going to happen.
No, exactly. So they're going to have to be a little smarter about how they work things, but they're going to have time to get there. Their next job is to get ready for the repechage, assuming they go on with it. That very much is job done for Romania, and in a healthy position, and I think deserved qualifiers on balance. I think so, an important win over Portugal, which saw them home.
2 of them. That was it. I think over the course of the last couple of years, that was the making or breaking of both Portugal and Romania, I think, in the campaigns, big pivotal games.
So that obviously knocked Portugal for 6. Portugal's game against Russia obviously cancelled in advance, and so that left us with one more game on Sunday, March 20th.
That's right. In the snowy confines of of Chala Stadium in Tbilisi. They were shoveling snow off it beforehand, and we were looking at it going that's not good for Spain.
No, definitely wasn't good for Spain. And in the end, an incredible 49 points to 15 win for Georgia. a remarkable performance, a statement performance from the Lelos.
Awesome. Yeah.
I mean,
they bullied them.
Yeah.
They turned the screw on them in the early exchanges, and Spain did fire a shot in the first half, but you could kind of see even the performances of guys like Jimeno and some leaders in there that they were probably still a little bit on cloud nine from the week before when they did officially qualify, and even though this was a championship decider shootout, they didn't bring the same energy or even close to what they had in Madrid against Portugal the week before. But take nothing away from Georgia, they turned that screw. They recognised that immediately, got their ins. Their back row were just monstrous throughout.
That back row is very close to really, really good. I desperately want to see them in that condition with that group of players try and take on a tier 1 team. And the reality is that the tier 1 team would probably lean back on the offensive maul and get it done that way. But in open play, good luck trying to beat up on Giorgadze, Saganadze and Becca Gergadze, who had combined for a wonderful 1-2-3 try.
Where they just all day long they weren't being stopped anyway. So that try was kind of beautiful in the second half, where they're like, what if we just give it to all three of them back to back to back? Then will they stop them? No.
It was off a not great scrum, but Becca Gergadze picks it up, shrugs off the first defender, shrugs off the second, and barnstorms his way forward. Then off the next one, Saganadze just sits down the first man, and he does freakish levels of physicality, the way he careens forward in every contact. Did it again, and then around the corner, Giorgadze 1-2-3, first two break them up, third one crosses the line, and that was the picture. This back row was sensational. But also, to be fair, the forward, the inside tight five guys, and particularly the props, actually particularly Gigashvili of all, did stepped up in big style. We'd said in advance of the game that Spain might have a stronger tight five, and while I think
didn't turn out that way.
Well, Gigashvili was getting so many turnovers, jackal steals, and they were just getting blown away physically.
They were. Also, shout out to Little Lobs and Idza at halfback. It was a toss up at the start of the season. He wasn't being trusted. Well, he wasn't being trusted over Idza at the beginning when they were drawing with Portugal, and he was staying on the bench. He was kicking drop goals from restarts here, and then he was pretty much man of the match, and like he was pulling strings, pulling defenders out, and then finding
the assist
offloads.
for Sharakadze's try was huge.
He was everywhere, set a wonderful tempo and got those big runners moving forward, and got even guys like Veseladze and stuff looking very, very good off the service that he was providing. Tato had a solid game as well. Niniashvili is so dangerous out there as well. Again, he is operating at that top couture's and on a top level of top couture's level. He's rocking into these tier 2 comps just looking like, one of these things is not like the other every time he gets the ball. But then also, who's on the wing scoring tries for fun? Tabu Sadze. I can't knock him. He just has a great habit, and it was actually after Niniashvili went off with a knock, and the game was somewhat in the balance when he just popped up with a worldie of a try to allay those fears.
A couple of great scores like that, which were just, it was an example of the evolution of the team. Where even more than just the individual talent, it was the fact that they were bashing on the door and Spain were hustling in the contact, and they didn't tirelessly go around the corner, pick and jam.
They flashed it to an edge.
Yeah, exactly. They tied up the defence, and then at the exact right moment held their width really well, and just basic skills. Actually, Veseladze doesn't get a lot of shout outs. He's not scored many tries since his flashy finish against Ireland in Dublin, those in the Autumn Nations Cup a couple of years ago. But his nuts and bolts passing, his knowledge of depth, just holding depth at the right times. He gives a lovely ball every time. Sharakadze likewise. Those two have a very good telepathy and just very smart footballers in the midfield, know exactly what they have to do, and they find their quick men on the edge and they take tries really well. They've become a wonderfully clinical side, and that aspect of what they're doing is really exciting. The physicality, the explosive physicality of their back rowers on defence and their quality on offence to be able to take tries creates a really, really promising team with work to do at set piece.
That's very much it. There's still
defensive
work to be done.
Is still a mess.
Yes, it is, and it is a concern because it seems to have disimproved rather than improved in
it's kind of just
times.
The same. It was really bad in that Autumn Nations Cup. The defensive maul.
It's true. It is a work on for them. And then from Spain's point of view, actually, it was a bridge too far, but they weren't overly disappointed. The coach was saying, it was the World Cup was all we wanted, and we did that last week.
And they rocked up with against a Georgian side who were at such an emotional pitch and just had such a point to prove from early doors
that was where that scoreline came from. From very early doors, before even there were any scores on. It was looking like Jimeno falling off contacts, and it's like, that's not good. That's not going to be good at all. It was a bridge too far for Spain to claim the Rugby Europe title. But that doesn't necessarily tell the whole story, because they did qualify for the World Cup. They did manage to get themselves into that second place, that automatic qualification. Romania have managed to come out with the third spot in the repechage. Well, there's other news that was breaking in the meantime in relation to that World Cup bid.
Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, Spain are back in the mire of the player eligibility rules. Yet again, and it's to do with this South African prop. But he only played in the 2 Netherlands games, which is crazy to me, because if he's on the fringe and if there's any kind of doubt, why would you play him at all? Because they could have won those games with anyone else at prop. But the concern is that during COVID he was meant to be going for his eligibility in terms of residency in Spain for 3 years at least, and yet for I think it was 6 or 8 of the 12 months in one of the years he was living in South Africa in lockdown. So it's they're hoping, and they'll probably plead the case, that the COVID kind of weirdness throws that up into the realms of let's let it slide. But it is fundamentally stupid, and they won't be able to claim no precedent, because the last time out. Gavin Vandenberg is the name of the prop, and so basically he played in both Netherlands games. 2020 and 2021. He played, so obviously one of those not a qualifier, despite what I'm reading here in this article. But basically, he may not have served the 3 years of residency, as you're saying. The thing, personally, I think it's a massive mistake. Yes, from the Spanish administration.
If it ends up being as costly as it was last time out, which is only 4 years ago, so that's why you can't claim good behaviour or no precedent.
You can just claim what are you doing? This is madness. But at the same time, first of all, there's potential leeway in the sense that COVID threw a lot of what the normal orthodoxy is into question. Yeah. And he was still, I believe, contracted to a Spanish club at that time and officially playing for them. They might not have done their due diligence in terms of checking he was still in the country, but what qualifies you as a permanent resident and what not? Can there be an exemption to that? I'm not sure. I don't know how I'd feel about it if he was, Captain Vandenberg, who was charging through Portuguese players and scoring tries. Yeah, I think I might feel differently about it.
The fact that he was squad man Vandenberg, who was only getting a cap because it was the Dutch, and he wasn't actually involved in the tournament campaign.
And it was clearly just an oversight, and there's no malicious intent to cheat. I don't think there's any issue in terms of the fairness of competition.
The precedent, sure, the Russians managed to get 4 teams outed for different versions of this the last time.
No, it's no question. I'm not massively comfortable with the precedent. I like Portugal. I was rooting for Portugal in that game, as you were, but I don't want to see Spain get kicked out for this.
I don't think that any team. Well, obviously, if you get to the World Cup, it buries all of that. But no, it's not the way you want to see this settled after the 2 years that's been, after great stories coming from that Rugby Europe Championship and that Rugby World Cup qualifier that it was. Spain did manage to come out on top, and they didn't really do it with the help of this guy.
Didn't do it at all with the help of this guy. This guy was nothing to do with it. It was quality players like Ordas and Jordi Jorba and these guys. The sickening thing is that they're on a very nice course right now, Spain. They're on the course to be super competitive. I know they struggled 49-15, Georgia blew them away. But actually, they still managed to hustle in that game. They scored the first try, and they managed to get a maul try to make it a tight game in the second half. They have great offensive potential. Their kicking game is outstanding. They're at their best. Their tight 5 are very physical and very good. They're reining in their worst yellow card instincts.
They are.
They still gave one away in that game, but the previous game, it was in the last minute.
Yes,
they held out that long.
Before they see red.
Yeah, exactly. I think that this team is a coming force. I think they're on track to be very competitive at the World Cup, and so all of my sporting love and instincts just wants them to give them a.
But we don't fully know the ins and outs of it. As it stands, it is just a question mark. And as it stands, though, Spain are in. They've automatically qualified, so they're actually in our group, so we'll be playing Spain. and that is how I kind of hope it remains. This could be a ray of hope for Portugal after the fact, or perhaps you're saying just a red herring. Maybe it may be the case that this all gets quashed relatively soon. I kind of do hope that that's the case. I don't like to hear that after a 2-year intense qualifying period it to come down to something like that is
it is an error from their administration, but it's not a cynical one. It's not like he was a linchpin of their team. It's an oversight, so maybe move on. But overall, just massive congratulations to Georgia for seizing the title in Rugby Europe as brilliantly as they
Europe
did.
Won as sewn up as it ever was. Europe won spot.
And you
Georgia.
know what? Georgia right now are on track to be way more competitive. They get a do-over of the same group that they had the last time. Fiji, Wales and Oz. And actually they were third qualified. It's a bitter coincidence for them that in the last time out they managed to steal a third place qualification, automatically qualified, and then drew Fiji, who had fallen into fourth place. Now Fiji sees the third place and draw Georgia, which is a funny one. Fiji under Vern Cotter are going to be that bit better. Wales, as we know, have their issues, etc., and Australia are a bloody good team, but Georgia are going to be there this time. I'm convinced. I mean, they need to get a guy in they need to get a set piece coach in. I think they need to get another head in to figure out that area. But they're going about things in a much more positive way. Their squad is much better than it was 4 years ago, and I'm excited. I think they're going to
that blowout they suffered against Fiji doesn't seem to be on the cards because they can find tries.
No, exactly. It'll be more of a shootout.
Yeah, they'll be able to go for a shootout, whereas their avenues for success against Fiji have always been so few and far between.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas it feels like they're getting more strings.
Yeah, and I want to know what happened. I think the game against Fiji is really interesting. Maybe Kefesaladze is going to get sat down by Radradra, but some of those Fijian forwards who are so physical might struggle with Saganadze.
They will.
So I mean, I'm already looking forward to the World Cup so much. So here's hoping everything stays as is.
Yes, and here's hoping we're right in saying congratulations to Georgia, Spain, and Romania. And commiserations to Portugal, Netherlands.
Exactly. But awesome competition. Really enjoyed it. It's got me loving Tier 2 rugby, and now it goes on a break, the Rugby Europe, but it's done its job so well. It's taken Tier 2 rugby to new heights. And now our attention's going to have to turn elsewhere to the Americas for our next stint in Tier 2. Yeah. But also the enjoyable fixtures coming up. I just think that rugby is getting close to a precipice where we have so many more competitive teams, and that's really exciting.
When you can start talking about extending the worlds to have more teams in it, because
the World Cup. Well, we're getting close.
We're getting close to it there, because as we were highlighting that group that you were talking about, that was Georgia and Uruguay and Fiji, and that was the first group ever where every team got a win. Yeah, and that was only last World Cup. Hopefully, we have 2 groups like that this time around, and that's when you start to see, we're getting somewhere where this gap between Tier 1 and Tier 2 is being kind of reined in through the rising of the Tier 2 sides rather than the hobbling of the Tier 1 sides. That's the way you want is to bring them up to that level. And judging by the contributions of teams like Portugal, who are unlucky to miss out, but it contributed so much to this being such a high scoring, high skill, really well played tournament to set an amazing tempo for Tier 2. And exciting things coming out of Rugby Europe.
No question. But with that, we are going to park Rugby Europe and park. We're not quite going to park the past, because we have one other
little roundup to do.
Little thing from that same weekend. On Sunday, following Super Saturday, the under-20s had a Super Sunday. Sunday, which saw the Italians do the double over Wales with a 27-20
a very ugly
win.
Weekend, and a very pretty one for Italian rugby, but a very ugly one for Wales rugby there.
Yes, indeed. And Ireland took all the drama out of the day with a 59-5 Grandslam sealer against bottom of the table Scotland.
It was one of these things. It was men v boys, to be honest, by the looks of it. Ireland looking very, very good, and congrats to them.
Scotland thoroughly non-competitive. It was a wonderful win from Ireland, taken magnificently, winning away in England and winning away against France particularly.
That was the game of the tournament, similar to in the men's show, but it was different result this time. But they managed to squeak it with a last minute try and kick over the corner, but dramatic fashion for that one, but they were really, really good value for it. They played a great game out in England, barnstorming shootout, and some great finishes. Atsol King getting a few brilliant.
Some savage players in that team. So massive congrats to the Irish boys. Can't wait to see them playing more rugby in the forthcoming years. It's just a shame that there's no Junior World Championship this year to see them have a cut at that.
Always a great tournament. Actually, we'd love to see that back, because it's the first under-20s one since pre-COVID anyway. So they were the first to kind of go by the wayside when COVID COVID kind of spread around, so it'll be good to see things like that World Championship
next
return.
year they were saying 2023, but sure, listen, and sure, look, the last game was a win for France over England, 26-22, very creditable showing by England in a good game.
Yeah, no, England were good value in this.
It's just they had an Italian game where they scored nil.
That kind of may have prickled them into being as competitive as they were. There were questions asked about England from their media, as always there were, but and then on the table they finished in third, but it's unfortunate for them to be honest that they have that weight of expectation, even though they haven't played a competitive under-20s game in well over 2 years, and they still were pretty good, and there were a lot of good players there. It just didn't quite fall for them,
no question. But yes, that was the under-20s, and it was a fabulous tournament, thoroughly enjoyable. But now we are going to park all of that and take a step back into the future. Yes, we're turning our attention now to the Women's Six Nations. Round 2 coming up this weekend. We're back in the present. We also do have to jump to the recent past for last weekend, where we had the opening round of the competition. Very good round of rugby it was. Scotland and England opened the show in a pretty well attended health stadium in Dam Health Stadium in Edinburgh, which saw England run out 57-5 victors against a Scotland team that did look a lot better than they looked in the qualification tournament, that showed a capacity to move the ball wide, some good handling, some good skills, some encouraging things to build on, and they just found themselves up against this juggernaut of an England team.
The team are just monstrous. As you were saying, they do look a little bit like Saracens when they're in the championship, just in terms of the calibre around them, but they are raising the bar in this game, and 57-5, an emphatic statement in round 1. They will be looking for no less than another Grand Slam, and I wouldn't bet against them based on this showing.
You just look at the combination of Sarah Byrne's physicality in the contact, and then the quality of Abby Dow on the edge, and all of these players. Marley Packer comes into the team, grabs a try straight away. She's awesome. Poppy Cleala's awesome, as we know. They've got so many class players in that outfit, and yet it's the shape, it's the very good shape that they run. They're so really well drilled. They keep their spacing so well, they run off each other so well.
Crisp and
it's
accurate.
It's another level of offense to anything that the women's game has ever seen, in terms of just the structure of it, the way they stick to their shape and they open up defences with relentless ease. I'd imagine this is an ugly start for Scotland, but Scotland they've just qualified for the World Cup. They're buoyed a little bit, and this result will probably age better than it feels after the initial aftermath, because I'd expect this England team could be doing something similar to a lot of teams in this comp. They're exciting teams in this comp, and they all look to have improved, and I'm curious to see what it looks like, one of them standing up to England, but I'm not sure what to make of this from Scotland's point of view. I thought they hustled hard enough, but England are just a very, very, very good team.
Monster. It's as tough a matchup as you can get on round 1, to be fair. He's having to face these English juggernauts, and sure enough, they've got off to a winning start. The second game then was our own charges, Ireland in their own rebuild mode, welcoming Wales to Dublin. That match finished Ireland 19, Wales 27. A very unfortunate 3 tries and 8-point defeat for Ireland, who despite playing some very, very encouraging rugby with a very new team, with I think Emer Considine at fullback with 20, has the most caps of anyone in it. It's brand new team, and in the open play they look really, really good. They're grabbing tries. Their running lines are very, very nice. Some of their back strike runners are very, very exciting. It was a combination of the set piece and the kicking game that went to pot and scuppered them in this one, and Wales, with a meatier pack than they were bringing to the party last year, managed to turn the screw and threw a few maul tries, and then one obligatory Jazz Joyce try, that try that's probably going to pop up even against England or something. She's phenomenal. Wales ended up in deserved winners, but Ireland with a fair bit of encouragement to glean from it.
I thought it was a very enjoyable match. It was the close game of the 3 in the weekend. Obviously good at Ireland didn't get the job done. They were struggling physically. They weren't as big as Wales, but they were mighty good and mighty clinical in terms of the way they managed to turn opportunities into tries. Some of the offensive sets they went through were great. They paralleling the men's team, they had been a side that was bludgeoning and tried to be physical and tried to bully teams as best they could. Now they have 2 10s playing at 10 and 12. Stacey Flood has moved out to second distributor, and they've got some real talent on the edge. Eva Higgins, even at centre, plays like a winger. Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe is awesome. And then you've got Bevan Parsons, who came in off the bench and might well be starting next week, who was fabulous as well. And then the interplay from the forwards, the carrying of the forwards is fantastic. Linda and Jugan and Sam Monaghan.
Awesome combination. Both sides of the field, defence and offence.
They seemed to spend the game in a pod with each other, playing off one another really, really well. Sam Monaghan with shades of Brodie Retallick and the carry game on the edge.
And some of the offloads she was getting away. It was brilliant.
Yeah, the Sonny Bill style back pass for Jugan's try was awesome. But the flip side, unfortunately, was that they couldn't stop the Welsh maul, they couldn't stop the Welsh scrum, and ultimately
also they couldn't kick themselves in any kind of exit. It ended up that Flood was taking them, but for large periods it wasn't. And who's the Nicole Cronin, who was very able place kicker and did kick her goals, which the Welsh women did not do. Actually, it was not a good goal kicking showing from Wales. But on the exit, like, they just could get no purchase at all and couldn't exit. And that was the story of the second half, with the scrum malfunctioning, with the maul defence malfunctioning, and the kicking game malfunctioning. Didn't really matter how good they were in the offensive side. They couldn't get out. Once they were backed up, they couldn't get out, and it always took a concession to get them back out and up the field. And then when they did get up the field, they scored really well, and they held the lead for most of this game. But in the end, they relented and they were made to pay by a Wales team. They managed to hold the scrum a bit in the first half, but it was like as fatigue sets in, that weight matters, and it starts to tell in those second halves.
Speaking of Wales, with their 12 pro contracts and 12 reserve contracts, they look really well conditioned. But not just fit in terms of their ability to keep going, but strong. Like, they've done really good strength work.
Last year, Ireland put 40 odd on that Wales team that were in disarray this time last year. They've certainly steadied some ships and amended some things, and no doubt due in no small part to that new recent development of professionalism, allowing them to commit more to pre-seasons and things.
I'm excited to see how they go against England and France and some of these other teams. They look reasonably well balanced. Now listen, defensively they were opened up a few times. I'm not sure if they're the finished article, but they do have a nice big tough pack, and they've got Jazz Joyce obviously on the wing. She's electric. She was contained for large parts, but still showed glimpses of class, grabbed her obligatory try.
She did get on the hill, stuff happened.
Even the little stutter steps that suck players in and feed the next guy
down. She did a little goose step into a perp that absolutely broke one of our girls at one point.
She's all class all the time. Very exciting player. Hannah Jones at 13 taking her try at the death really, really well.
True.
I think they have some exciting talent, Wales, and I think that's a huge away win for them. Obviously we didn't know what shape they'd be in, but they're qualified for the World Cup, and they look away. Ireland obviously in a position where
it's all rebuild.
Yeah, it's very much all rebuild. They're the only team in this competition who aren't in the World Cup later in the year, so they've basically flushed everything out, picked a young team, got a new coach whose priority is to get them playing exciting offensive footy, and they delivered on that. I mean, personally, I had no complaints. I know they had issues with the set piece and the kicking game, but I had no complaints. They're going about things the right way. They're playing rugby the right way. They need to work on that stuff that they need to work on.
It would have been nice to get the win, but it's the kind of statement that you needed to back up what the IRFU's most recent statement about, like, changing of coach, getting Anthony, getting him out of there, getting a whole new think, listening to the players' complaints that were coming thick and fast last year. So it's time to kind of put a full stop on the previous Torrid campaign, and this is a new team and a rebirth. So we're going to forgive some growing pains within that.
Yeah, and
especially if they're playing some exciting footy.
On the pitch, they're going about things the right way, but it's a long process to get to where a team like England are, or even Wales are. They have a long way to go, and I do believe the IRFU will be committed to doing it, and they'll turn it around, and hopefully this is a first step in the right direction despite the 8-point loss.
Yes, indeed. It was little shades of Connacht, to be honest. Very pretty tries, but only 3 of them, and not quite enough for either losing bonus point or a try bonus point. But
2 tries conceded in the last 10 minutes.
All of that, a little loose. The final game of the weekend was out in France. France hosting Italy, and despite this being competitive for a wee while, ultimately France rolled out 39-6 winners. Italy were game and showed good hustle and good heart, but France's weight and power and then class ultimately told in the end.
Class in the last 20 minutes.
That's it.
But prior to that, it was mostly weight and power.
It was weight and power for the most part. That was it. Like, they lean on that. It's when that tells, when the damage is already done in that final quarter, that you can start seeing some pretty offloads and some pretty running rugby. But Italy made this a dogged fight for a while. They just couldn't break them down.
They couldn't get over the line. That was it. They got into the red zone a good few times. They had some good offensive plays, some good probing plays that earned them penalties, that earned them entrances, and time again they couldn't break the French women down. The French were really tough on the goal line.
The French
defence
defence was stellar.
But conversely, when France got up the other end, they were scoring pretty quickly and were getting over them physically. I mean, Medusa Fall, like,
she's a monster. I was impressed with her own Sam Monaghan, but geez, that woman is a tank, huge tank.
And she dexterous as well. Lovely finish from that opening try. Smart player, bossed the game up front, helped them a lot. And Italy, by contrast, were a little small. They were also a little, like, it was funny, they had this relentless approach of not kicking in recent times, and they did kick a bit in this game, and they kicked poorly as a consequence. But it was a case where, like, they're all offense, all running from everywhere game was only going to run them into trouble against a really physical team.
Yeah, no, it was.
They had moments of magic. Alice Adenka, the number 12, she was really
awesome,
exciting. They hauled her off after about 50 minutes. It was such a mistake.
I don't know if she was their best or something. But she was doing serious damage. Really lovely balanced runner of the ball as well. They have some good athletes too, Italy, and they do play some nice skills. They have some nice skills based stuff, which is probably what you get for a season of running the ball from everywhere as well. And they are trying to work a kicking game in, but it is a little clunky. They're not quite receptive.
They open this competition against France and then England. That's
a tough start.
It's going to be a tough start. They will then get the gap week, and they'll then get to work their way into the competition. And by the end of it,
who knows? Maybe that exposure will be good, but their offense didn't quite find the in that it needed. It got close a few times, but France's defense managed to repel them, and conversely, they weren't able to handle that power, that sheer size and power of that French pack. So 39-6 was the gap. A bit cruel for them. It was stretched out in that last quarter, really, to make it look a bit uglier than it really was.
The likes of Sansus and Tremoulier and then Boulard to bring on, who've all been like class in times gone by. They have
France look in rude health.
Crazy.
They look in rude health, and it is teeing up that massive clash in the end of the season when they meet England.
And they do need to get sharper. I think they will get sharper. They need to be. They need to arrive at the pitch of the game playing a bit
women
more
like Joanna
footy.
10 can be sharper than she was and will be, I dare say. So no, I wouldn't worry. It is mission accomplished in week one, which is all you can muster when you're France. So it leaves the standings as England on top after round one with 5 points. 52 point difference for France then with a paltry 33 points difference in second and 5 points also, and Wales also managed to get the full 5 out of Dublin with only an 8 point differential. So they're 1, 2 and 3, and then Ireland, Italy and Scotland are the bottom half of the table as it stands, leaving it a bit tough. Round 2 then rolls on next weekend, starting on 2nd of April, where we have 2 games. We have France v Ireland.
Really interesting game, that France v Ireland. I'm serious. I like France look very physical. Medusa Fall, they look brilliant. Maybe they blow us away physically, but like the way that Ireland were playing, I do think that they have the capacity to get some stuff away.
If France are a little bit complacent or a little bit
if France rock up in the same kind of humour that they rocked up against Italy early doors, maybe Ireland have the scope to actually find some passes and score some tries. I actually think that they're a more likely shout, even as a young, no cap kind of team, than they would have been, a couple of years ago with a team that might have been able to stand up to them more physically. This Ireland team can play ball. Hopefully they'll have Bevan Parsons and Murphy Crowe, who are 2 of the best wingers out there on the edge, and maybe they can make some stuff happen.
Tries. That'd be nice.
I think they could. I think that'll be a great. I think it'll be a good test for France. We'll see how good their defence is. If they can swallow Ireland up and chew them up and spit them back out and win the game as they did against Italy by a comfortable margin, then obviously their defence is in great shape. They'll kick on. Or they could find out something about themselves. They could be stretched, they could be opened up, they could find it difficult, and they could end up having to do something similar to what Wales had to do and really knuckle down to actually get the win.
Maybe.
I'm interested to see how it takes, what kind of shape it takes.
I'm hopeful.
I think Ireland are good. I do. I think they can score tries. I'm excited. I loved watching them last week. I loved the interplay of the forwards. I thought the skills were excellent. Off the chain.
So bring on those French women. I was impressed with the French women last week and ongoing as well. So it is a tough task for following out in Toulouse as well. Out in Toulouse following a cruel home defeat that they'll be a little jaded from. But here's hoping they can rally.
They can't be jaded yet. It's early doors.
Well, I know, but from a home defeat you will be. But then possibly the game of the round is when Wales host Scotland, because that's got like some juicy spice and fire from those World Cup qualifiers, as well as like. Both sides are now fancying where they are, and they're going to the World Cup. They're going to try and rally. This is an important one. Wales have just claimed a really good scalp in week one and will be rolling into this with more momentum.
They looked really good. They look big and strong. They've got, as we said, class players like Jazz Joyce. on the edge. They building some offense and marrying it with some good set piece. Maybe Wales could be really competitive in this competition. Or if Scotland are competitive, because they looked like Scotland again showed some good skills, showed some good hustle. It just looked so rudimentary compared to what England were doing. I think if Scotland are competitive in this game or try and nearly turn Wales over, it will be a stark indication of just how far ahead England are from everybody, and that would be a scary reality if that happens. Or maybe Scotland are a step behind in terms of physicality, and Wales can get after them in this game as well.
Yeah, with the home advantage and momentum as well, which is as much a factor in the women's game as it is in the men's game, as it is in the men's Six Nations, as it is in the under-20 Six Nations. It is in the women's Six Nations too. And like, even if they're both two sides of a similar standard, Wales and Scotland, Wales managed to get that away win in week 1 against Ireland, and that's a clean scalp and a bonus point victory. Scotland, before they even knew how good they were, they had to face England.
Yes.
And it's like, and like you were saying with Italy, their first 2 weeks are England and France, and like momentum could scupper their chances before they even get going in it, and we don't really know. It is away from home, that Wales will have that home advantage factor, so I'm probably making them slight favourites going in just based on both home advantage and momentum advantage. But it remains to be seen where that level is. You're right in pointing out, like, maybe it is that Scotland were really good, it's just that England are that much better, or maybe Scotland are a level below. We'll find out a bit more, but it's definitely a competitive game.
Yeah, and it's just going to be exciting as well. I think I did enjoy what Wales brought to the table. It was nice and physical. They had a good competitive pack. If they can get a good win here against the Scots, get that rolling maul going, get Jazz Joyce on the ball a bit more, start to build a team around a competitive forward pack, and then some killers out wide as well. You could start to see the picture of a competitive Wales, which was not something we had last year, and would be quite the turnaround.
It would. Well, it would change the landscape of the tournament quite significantly already. Definitely. And then the final game of the round actually comes on Sunday afternoon. We have Italy hosting England, which, if they can do the same as their under-20 compatriots, then maybe you can nil them and win a nice 6-0 game. That'll be fun. I don't think that is on the offing. I do rate Italy and what they're doing at this level. I like the way they run the pill.
Their skills.
Their skills, their temperaments, like some of their players. But geez, this England monster just rolls on. And bar a very, very good France on their A game in the final week, I just don't see anything unsticking England. They look
really, really well organised, quality throughout, and it's like, if you cope with the power, you'll be done by the speed and the class. If you can just about hold your shape, we'll do you with the power game. And they have the offloads to match. You feel like watching this England team that, as good as they are, like, if they're really pushed, they might have another level.
It doesn't look like they have to get out of third or fourth gear. You see it a lot with drills. You see it a lot. We watch Leinster a lot of the time. Sometimes you see them in a mismatch game where they do coast, and it's a comfortable victory at the end, but you feel like there's more in the tank. And this England team paint that picture an awful lot. Even when they were pumping the Black Ferns last year, you're thinking, like, doesn't look like the top, like, it doesn't look like they're stressed right now. It looks like they're just cruising to victory over the world champions.
Indeed. So they overload the sort of rudimentary nature of their defenses with a very professional looking offense that looks kind of Sarri's-esque in terms of the number of options and the shape that they have and the passes that they pick, and they're all so clean and so crisp. And very often, if it's Abidou out there, it just takes a one-on-one matchup, and that's it. Then they're away and they run great tracking lines, and it's relentless. It's a level above what they've been playing, and I think that still is true here for Italy. I'm confident that long term that gap will close, and that actually their dominance is a positive thing in terms of dragging up the standard. But it does make, like, exciting, fun to watch teams like Italy. It paints a cruel picture for them. Paints a cruel picture for them, and unfortunately, that is how I see this game
it'll probably
going.
do the same for our exciting young
I
team
agree.
as well.
Exactly. They're very, very impressive.
I'd agree. That is round 2. Looking forward to it. This TikTok Six Nations as it is now, well underway. And
are you obliged? Are you being paid by TikTok to say it every time?
No, it's rebranded and it's rethings. But one of the things I do approve of, and we were calling for a while, is that it was COVID that pushed it out of the schedule alongside the men's Six Nations, and it's right that they've kept it there.
Yes.
Because it's of its own, it has its own little window now.
And
it just makes more sense.
You're getting crowds. Like, it
the
was
crowd
being
in France
buried,
last week was
in
phenomenal.
Grenoble, yeah.
Grenoble was great also, but likewise if you're
Ireland broke the record in the RDS. They had over 6,000.
There you go.
I would have been there. I'm raging. I wasn't actually. I had a match of my own to play.
Yes,
so I wasn't able to go. But I'm gutted now because the rest of the home fixtures are in Cork and Belfast.
That's right.
So unfortunately, I missed my chance. But there was a great crowd out there in the RDS. To watch it, great crowd out in Edinburgh as well, and it's because it's being given room to breathe.
Yeah.
Like when you had the women's under-20s and men's Six Nations on at the same weekend, you were just burying it. You were burying
that was
it.
In the news cycle, it was completely buried.
And just in like you can't go to three. Most human beings can't go to 3 rugby matches in one weekend. So you're naturally going to go to the one that's the big event.
Yeah.
That has all the travelling support here, and it did get lost, unfortunately. And I think having it be its own window is really positive for fan engagement. People will be just coming back from the Six Nations, sort of still chewing at the bit to see a bit of international footy. They get the women's game coming in. It gets everybody excited. It's also better from a weather point of view. You're seeing better high-skilled games because you're not playing winter footy. It's kind of spring also into hopefully summer footy. Very true.
I approve of all of that that has resulted from it. And I'm excited by the first round of fixtures. I think the second round is going to deliver some cracking moments as well. So
Ireland's historic win in Toulouse.
That'll be a nice one to take to the bank, all right.
I'm telling you, man.
Yeah.
They're going to get some stuff off.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
I was very encouraged by week 1.
Yeah,
I'm on board.
Let us know what you think down in the comments below. Who you got in the women's game? It's an exciting tournament, and we're excited to be covering it as well. Really,
absolutely. Listen, with that, we're going to park test footy, and basically we're heading towards wrapping up the show after our long protracted stint. We just have a little bit of housekeeping to do, and basically checking in with the club game, which we left a number of weeks ago.
Yes, we couldn't do it the week before because of time constraints. So we're just gonna touch base, I guess, is the best way to phrase it, in terms of where each league is at. Some of them are reaching fever pitch, others are only just getting started, but we'll touch in on all of them. We're going to start in France with the Top 14, and very interesting developments. All right, it is heating up in that barrage race already. There's been a fair bit of chopping and changing. The Montpellier and Bordeaux axis still rocking.
They've been the
top.
most consistent.
They have been the most consistent throughout the season and through the last few weeks when we've been missing, and they are still 1 and 2. Toulouse and Stade, or La Rochelle, I should say, have both managed to. The last time we left them, they were kind of creeping on the edge of the barrage thing. They're now in 3rd and 4th respectively, so they're kind of securing their playoffs. La Rochelle had a huge
19-0 win over Racing at the weekend. Did you see their coast to coast try? Raymond Rule. Raymond Rule dancing his way down the left wing. It was great to see a bit of Raymond Rule action. But yes, Toulouse get that big win over Lyon on the weekend with Dupont. They brought Dupont, Cyril Bay, and I believe who was the third, all on the same time, 3 of the Grandslam heroes.
Was it Flamont or something? No, Flamont started.
No, it was it might have even been Entomac. No, it was Cyril Bay, Francois Cross, I believe, and Dupont all came on at once. And Dupont had this hilarious play where he basically did a pick and jam from his own 22, carried a lock with him, and then kept going, shrugged away, popped away, slipped another tackle, ran to the edge, and then flicked a pass to the winger, and away they went. And it was just
the guy's a freak.
But also just like, he's a freak, one of the best players, if not the best player in the world right now, and he's on cloud 9. He's at confidence at peak. He couldn't be in a better state. So he's just fun to watch right now, and I think Toulouse, after that shaky period in the Six Nations, just fine.
They get a bunch of Grand Slam winning kind of types back into their team, and they're absolutely fine, just in time for Ulster to be bricking it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Ulster have a hell of a task competing with them. And then there is that classic barrage race with
Cast as ever sitting themselves at 5th at the minute.
Cast and Lyon are in with Racing and Clermont, and maybe Toulon, who've been rallying, trying to chase.
Toulon were propping up the bottom of the table a wee while ago, and they've managed to rally themselves all the way up to 9th and still trying to chase that knockout. The bottom of the table sadly is made up of Perpignan and Biarritz, the 2 teams that have come up, 2 teams that I do like, 2 clubs that I do root for, but they are struggling to deal with the intensity of top 14s.
Absolutely.
footy, and so they are at the bottom at the minute.
Some decent games this weekend. I think the pick of them, Lyon-Toulon will be a good game. Bordeaux-La Rochelle, and then the Parisian derby is always fun between Racing and Stade Francais on Sunday.
Maybe Cast v Toulouse. Cast in playoff mode, this is the time of the year where Cast start throwing spanners in the works.
Unless Toulouse are just coming back to the fold.
Just going to cruise through them. But yes, some good games this weekend for sure. Also, then our own charges are in the URC, or the United Rugby Championship, which has gone through 14 rounds now of action, and the picture is starting to get a little clearer up to the top. Obviously, the top 8 are going to get through to the knockout stages, or the post-season, or whatever you want to call it. But what's the picture? The more recent picture has been the Saffas are coming, and they're doing well at home, so they are.
Yes.
The top of the table is still Leinster at 55, Ulster 50, then Munster on 47, Glasgow 45, Edinburgh 43, but then 6, 7 and 8 you're talking Stormers, Bulls, Sea Sharks, all of them up in the 38, 37, 36 kind of range.
Yeah, and crucially all of them playing their remaining fixtures at home.
They are. They still have a game in hand.
Not going to be caught. Not going to be caught. Let's be real.
Well, the highest ranking Welsh side is Ospreys on 9th, and they're just below. They're 6 points off the Sharks at the minute.
The only thing is that the Sharks did have the first home defeat in a torrential downpour in Durban. They were beaten by Edinburgh. And they've lost to Canyo Am, and their balloon has burst a little because of it. He was very much the Fulcrum player, and their whole form has just fallen off a cliff since he's gone. Don't look the same team. And frankly, Kerwin Bosch's form has fallen off a cliff as well. He's all over the place out there. So Sharks are the most vulnerable at the moment.
They are on the chopping block of it.
The Stormers played a class game with Ulster and just about got away with the win. Ulster crashed over the line with a few minutes to go, but it was ruled a knock-on. And then after the fact, they said it shouldn't have been because the ball went backwards.
It was knocked on by the Stormers defender who knocked it out of his hands.
Advantage, and then Ulsterman lands on it. Could have been a try.
Tough one, but it was still a great game.
So goes life, but it was a great game. Stormers do look good. Gallant looks awesome. Tambwe for the Bulls looks awesome. Evan Royce for the Stormers smashed Vermeulen in a big moment of future Springbok versus incumbent Springbok. That was very exciting. The Saffas have breathed life into this competition.
And at the Scots will be there in the postseason. The Irish will be there as ever, although Connacht are struggling.
Connacht won't be there.
But the Saffas are coming. The Welsh are not, unless something changes very drastically in the last few weeks. The Welsh are probably going to be missing out on the postseason here.
I wouldn't have thought so. Some big games this weekend. The pick of the Munster-Leinster, obviously big Irish clash between top 2 historical teams in Ireland. But then also Bulls-Ulster and Victoria. That's two class games, really. If you're going to watch 2, watch them. Stormers Ospreys also happening. Lions Edinburgh also interesting. Edinburgh looking to go unbeaten in South Africa. And
Bennett and Connacht could be a fun game of floundering around between them.
If given the other games that are on the list, I would
Cardiff, the Welsh derby that won't end up mattering. I would say if you're going to watch 1 or 2, maybe Bulls Ulster or Munster Leinster or maybe Lions Edinburgh for the colour of it all.
Absolutely.
Some good games this weekend, no doubt. And then to shift across the water to the Premiership in England, where the picture has been kind of clear for a little while now, but is kind of, we're getting towards that business end now. We're getting towards those last few fixtures. But Leicester Tigers still atop with 80 points. 80 points. Played 20 games. Saracens in second with 68, with a game in hand over them, but still. Quins then in third on 63. Exeter in fourth on 57.
Yes.
Closely followed by Sale on 55 and Gloucester on 54. Then you have Northampton and London Irish on 53. And all of those are kind of still in the mix. That's that top 8. Wasps are back on 48. I mean, maybe they're still in the mix, but it's probably not really.
Bear in mind they've played 20 games. They're only going to play 24. So a lot of these teams.
It's not likely that a lot of these teams. I mean, it's looking like the top 4 is probably going to be the top 4. Maybe Sale sneak in. Maybe Gloucester sneak in.
Poor old Sale. They had a draw on the weekend with Bath, which really hurt them, and they were winning the game. It was just that they had Faf de Klerk kicking their place kicks, and he missed like all of them. and they drew the game. I mean, he left
a
about
place kicker.
12 or 13 points behind off the tee.
They've had some. It's a funny old season for Sale, to be honest.
And
it's been
they're
weird.
like, they started the season with lots of momentum and a great identity and a great coach, and like gradually as the season has gone, between injuries but also just all of these lost players who are going to be leaving them at the end of the season, they've just become a fractured entity. I feel like Sanderson might just take off and join the England coaching ticket, because it's like, screw it, I got to be a head coach for 1 year and then my whole team is gone.
That's true.
It seems a bit harsh.
So they'll hope that they can rally enough and squeak in there to the playoffs and maybe sign off with it, and they would be good value in there, but at the minute it's the Chiefs who are holding that ticket.
There was a great game as well in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium between Saracens and Bristol. That was an absolute classic. 27-23 it finished to Saracens, and a great crowd in there. Really cool ground. It's going to be the host of the Champions Cup final next year, and I can't wait. I'm definitely going. That's a cool stadium.
It is a cool stadium, to be fair. It was a good show they were putting on there. This weekend then we have a couple of some interesting games. Sale themselves meet Saracens in a top of the table clash that Sale, to be honest, could do with winning, and that's going to be a tough ask for them. Exeter host Bath. They'll be hoping to not repeat the Sale mistake and just kind of see Bath off, which is what most teams have been doing. Then you have Gloucester Wasps, decent game. Northampton Bristol, potentially decent. Poor old Bristol have had a tough old time of it. They're rooted in 10th with separation either side of them, and it looks like it's just going to be one of those
seasons. They look
much
better than they had been to start the year, but they're still struggling to finish games.
And the Sunday game might be good as well. We have London Irish and playing Harlequins on the Sunday. That could be worth a watch.
Yeah, absolutely. But yes, listen, that is European domestic rugby, but we must move on and look at domestic rugby from around the world.
That's right.
And we're going to start in the States, which just has rumbled on. Just a quick update on the old MLR. The Eastern Conference is being topped by the 6-1 New England Free Jacks.
Looks good since the opening of the season, and they continue to look good.
ATL have rallied. They're in second. New York with them on third. Toronto a little behind, but they have eked out a winning record at the moment of the Arrows, but work to do for them. NOLA 3 and 4 need to rally if they're going to have any chance, but it's still very competitive. DC and Dallas are the only two who are completely winless and off the pace. On the Western Conference, it's Austin Gilgroni's leading the way, then San Diego. Seattle are 4 and 4 now, sitting in third, definitely need to speed up. And then Houston 4 and 3, but behind Seattle, because they obviously have the game in hand, along with LA also 4 and 3, but a chance to usurp Seattle if they win their game in hand. And then Utah, unfortunately, 2 and 5, having made the playoffs last year, they are out and struggling this year. And a couple of good games going on this weekend as well. Toronto against ATL promises to be a pretty game. And Austin against Houston again. That's a big game between two big sides in the Western Conference, which could be a crucial one.
Maybe Utah Warriors and San Diego Legion might have a good competitive one, but the other ones look a little blowout-y to my eye.
You don't get too many blowouts in this league, though, funnily enough.
No, true, but LA Giltinis against the Dallas Jackals in LA might provide one. Also, Old Glory DC have struggled with pretty much everyone.
Old Glory and Dallas are a ways away. Although Dallas have been getting losing bonus points and getting close.
They have. I'm kind of rooting for them to get that first win.
They were screwed over by the very beginning of the of the competition.
They have a brand new franchise, and their first 2 rounds are away from home against really good teams. Dreadful. So they have an insurmountable losing record as you have your first home game. It's 0-2. No good.
Exactly. And then just to move on, just to briefly check in on Japan, which doesn't have any games this weekend, but it continues to be Suntory and the Wild Knights who top the league, with Kubota Spears not too far behind. Bit of a gap then with the Cannon Eagles and Brave Lupus and Verblitz then behind them. And that's kind of your top half.
The top 6 and the top half are thing, I think the top Suntory on 41 points, Wild Knights 40, then Kubota Spears on 39. They're all the kind of top bunch, and then the last playoff spot is 4th. That's where Cannon Eagles are on 32, bit of a gap. Then 29 for Toshiba Brave Lupus and 27 for Toyota Verblitz. So those 3 are jostling for position, but there's quite a drop off between 6th on 27 and 7th on 16.
There still is that massive gap in the Japanese league, unfortunately, although it is a cleaner format than it has been in years gone by.
True.
But then it would be remiss of us not to touch on SLAR.
SLAR, indeed, yes.
The Superliga Americana Rugby. We actually had a question on our last podcast of where we can watch it, and unfortunately the answer after a lot of digging is nowhere. I mean, you were supposed to be able to get it on their app, their Sudamerica app, but it just doesn't work.
No.
And unfortunately it's being broadcast on telly in South America. Crucially, it's on ESPN over there. They have it actually on on a streaming service as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can watch it if you're in the Americas, no problem at all. There's a way to do it, but actually where we're based, they're just not broadcasting it. They're growing a domestic audience, which I appreciate, I guess. Although it would be nice to see the games ourselves.
And actually, it would be some YouTube clips that are going thing, and actually
Twitter clips as well.
America's Rugby News is a good resource for actually writing up on the game, which we use quite a bit. But it's more so than your Rugby Europes or your Americas trying to get these
very
games.
much feels a world apart when you're trying to seek it out. Although it seems worth seeking out, because actually for the first time, like, the draft system has worked so well. Every team has a loss on the books.
Every team has
all
a win
the games
on the
are
books.
It's focus. The Cobras, I think, are without a win, but everyone else, and the Cobras are the Brazilian team, funny Brazilian, Brazil not taken to the rugby like every other country in South America, seemingly.
No.
They just like scrummaging, apparently.
Yes,
but yes, it was I believe it was Selknam who got the surprise win over the Jaguares and gave them their first defeat. Selknam, the Chilean side, who managed to do that to them, and they've drafted out a bunch of Argentinian players. They made all the teams competitive, and it's done wonders for the league. It's now a competitive competition, and we get to find out things about this Jaguares team and who they are really.
They're sitting in second after the opening 3 rounds. Now we have 10 points each for Selknam, Jaguares, and Penarol. But it's Selknam with the points advantage who are sitting on top of that thing.
I love it.
Then on 8 points, Olympia Lions and Cafeterias Pro on 5, and then the Cobras of Brazil on the 1 point.
Yeah, although important to note that the Cobras, like, they have a 23-17 loss in the books, an 18-10 loss in the books. Yeah, they're not even getting blown away.
They've scored some points and they've not been blowouts. This is it. And I think there are 2 more rounds of this phase 1 that they're doing before they move the rest of the tournament to Montevideo. So there's 2 more rounds to come up over the next coming weeks, wrapping up on the 7th and the 4th, and then I think there's a brief break while all the teams move and do some kind of isolate or whatever, and then it's going to be Montevideo to sign off the rest of the season. So that's pretty exciting.
Very good. But yes, with all that club rugby around the world, we must touch on Super Rugby Pasifika, which has been going on in the background. They made a mockery of me, my wasted money buying their rights to watch it all, and then they only go and give it to Sky Sports anyway. But sure, listen,
I'm sure Sky Sports has kind of disappeared from the Super Rugby game for far too long. It's nice to have it back on the telly.
That's true. Some fascinating dynamics playing out in the Brazilian, not Brazilian. Sorry, where's my head at? In the New Zealand conference.
Yes.
Things have been very interesting. Obviously. The Crusaders took that L to the Chiefs.
They did.
And then they managed to get it back, although the Chiefs were missing Sawakula, who's been such a key part of what they're doing.
Not just for the facial hair acumen, but for the hurdling of Aaron Smith and other contributions that he'll make.
Savage player.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And they've had some great wins, the Chiefs, but amazingly, well, not amazingly, but brilliantly, Moana Pasifika managed to rock up with a win and managed to beat the Hurricanes.
They did.
And hence have a better record in the Kiwi Conference than the Highlanders, who are the only side who are 0-5.
There you go.
In the whole competition.
And they did struggle. I did watch them struggle against the Blues, I think it was, recently, Moana Pasifika. Or was it? No, it was when was that? That was...
The Chiefs absolutely slaughtered them anyway. I remember that one.
Right. Yeah, that was it. The Chiefs did kind of do a number on them and they struggled with it. But then they come out the week later, or the week before, or the week after, I should say, and really did put it all together. And we've to go with Fiji and Drua managing a couple of good wins and looking very good themselves, very dynamic and very competitive. It's good that those new teams, we were so fearful at the very outset of this tournament that it would just be blowouts and it wouldn't be competitive, but it's anything but. It is very, very competitive. Even in the games that they're losing, they're showing good hustle and good heart and good hunger. And like the Aussie Conference, the general standard has improved as well. Teams like the Taz are much better than they were last year. The Force, much better. Actually, the Force won an excellent game against the Fijian Drua. Really came down to the wire at the very death. They managed to nick it, but it was just a really, really good ding-dong battle and a good clash of styles. So there's a lot more kind of colour and dynamic to this tournament, and yeah, the fact that the Crusaders have already taken an L now just throws that open up a little bit more, removes some of that jaded energy that you had.
Who had money on the Highlanders being the only winless team
at this juncture.
Yeah, 5 games in, or 6 games for a lot of teams. But obviously the format is going to change. Basically, they're doing all their domestic stuff first. Then they will travel. That is in the schedule.
That's right.
So they will have a period where the Kiwi teams are playing the Oz teams.
I think the Kiwi teams still have to play catch up because they've had a few more COVIDed out.
Yes.
So there's a little bit of that going on in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, it'll be exciting definitely to see the inter-country matches as well once all of this wraps up. But yeah, no, there'll be a grand old season to come and some great playoffs to come as well. I don't think that I'm as blown away by the standard necessarily as I have been, and that probably bodes well for the Aussie teams. Like sometimes you look at the Kiwi matches and you think, geez, how can anybody compete? But this time it's possibly simmered down a little bit from that high threshold, and actually we could get some very competitive games in the inter-country matches, which is definitely what I'm rooting for.
That's what I'm rooting for as well. Yeah. In terms of this weekend, a couple of good ones. Crusaders welcome the Highlanders. That could be tough for the Landers to get that win going.
Win they need.
Not going to happen in Christchurch, one would think. But Fijian Drua versus Waratahs is a game I'm looking forward to. That could be really exciting. The Drua have impressed so far. The Waratahs have looked better this year so far. Then the Blues Moana Pasifika as well.
After playing them in midweek, they're going to play them again. It's crazy.
It's a bit bizarre. And Reds v Brumbies, the Aussie clash. That's obviously a fun game. Also, the Hurricanes hosting the Chiefs. Anytime the Chiefs take the field is pretty box office to my mind. So just good games in Super Rugby.
I love that Reds Brumbies rivalry. It keeps on going. It's always a tight game. Brumbies got the win the last time. Reds will be steaming and looking to undo
make amends. Guys like Tupou steaming. That's always a good recipe when he takes the field in that state.
Yes, absolutely.
There's some real box office stuff, and we will keep abreast of it as it goes on. That's round 7 that's coming up for most. I think round 6 for some. So it's early days. It's kind of purring into the middle game of the season in terms of a lot to play for still, but teams are still kind of coalescing and putting their shapes together. We'll start seeing some really, really high quality stuff, I think, in the coming weeks.
Absolutely. We should also mention Super Rugby Aupiki, which was won by Chiefs Manawa. Yes, they convincingly beat the Blues in the last game.
5-0, I think, in the grand final, which is kind of a little bit of a damp squib in terms of cup final atmosphere, but congratulations to the Chiefs Manawa. That was deserved winners.
Yes, absolutely. A shame that the competition was as short as it was. It felt like all the teams needed a little while longer to actually figure out who and what they were.
Well, especially when one got COVIDed off in the first week. That didn't help when it was such a condensed format anyway.
It figures out, or it turns out, that Chiefs Manawa against Matatu was the actual final,
as it turns out.
Turns out. But credit to them. Class post trophy interview from Ruby Tui as always.
She's always box office. She's great. She has better chat than most Kiwis you'll ever meet.
Well, she's got a touch of James Lowe about her.
She does. She's got a media presence about her. What was she saying? There was something about her middle name.
Liz. It's like, I thought it was short for Leslie, but it's short for Liz. Go. We want Aupiki.
That was it. That was great stuff. And she had a great one in the sevens as well over there in the Olympics as well. She's box office. And she's great on field as well, absolute warrior. Great to see that tournament getting underway and getting played. Congratulations to Chiefs Manawa, but also congratulations to New Zealand Rugby for kind of the hustle to get it going as a thing and following through even in the wake of COVID. And they are very COVID sketch and trying to do all kinds of things as well as the Super Rugby.
It's the beginning of something.
It's the beginning of something. It was the same we were saying about Slar a couple of years ago. It's very important to get that first season in the books, and now it is. They have a defending champions. So
and I believe Australia are going ahead with their own Super Rugby women's as well. And hopefully, maybe one day, if ambitions can allow, they'll have a proper Super Rugby between them all, and the women's game, which would be very cool.
That'd be great. So we did briefly travel back in time just to tidy up on that. But if you are looking for more of the women's game, we do have Premier 15s,
which is on ice actually.
It's on ice obviously because the Six Nations has taken precedent, but they played a fair few rounds of it so far, and it is a high quality tournament, getting better every year, to be honest. This tournament,
the bulk of the Wales squad, obviously the England squad as well,
recent
plenty of the Scotland squad, some of the Irish squad. God.
Yeah, this is it. Like the professionalism of Wales, that was the story going into this Six Nations and stuff, and that doesn't exist without this tournament right here, the Premier 15s. And
absolutely.
It's provided some good entertainment already. Saracens women, I think, topping it at the minute.
Lording it over everybody as 15-1. But sure, listen, we'll revisit that in May when it comes back. But with all of that said, just before we wrap up the show, we are going to run through some brief rugby news of the week, as we do. And we're going to start with a story which also runs back in time. I think we mentioned it on the last show we did, but didn't do it the proper justice, just that Michael Cheika has been appointed Los Pumas coach.
That's right. After many rumblings about Felipe Contepomi this or that, I think it was part of it was they couldn't actually secure kind of the contract release from Stade Francais
for
Quesada, but actually I think it's a shrewd enough signing in terms of like they had him in the camp already. There's a bit of coherence there, and what they need is to develop an offense, and Checa teams do attack well historically.
Yeah, he has been involved, and we haven't seen many signs of it. It looks as though you're right that the issue was they wanted Quesada, they couldn't get Quesada, and then they needed a stopgap coach to try and get them right for this World Cup. And Contepomi was floated as an idea, but he's never been a head coach before, and we just did a Jobs for the Boys appointment with Ledesma that didn't work out at all. Maybe we should get an established coach with World Cup credentials who can run an offense, and
well, maybe we can look no further than the one who's already in the shed.
Yeah, exactly. So provided his communication can cross the language barrier,
if his message can get across, because you're right in saying like it hasn't looked like a Checa team even with him in the
not even close. Like there haven't even been glimpses of what he used to bring to that Aussie team off set piece. All
he
of
used
that
to bring to Leinster way back when.
You look at that Aussie team from 2015. That's exactly how the Pumas want to play. Getting the wingers involved, inside balls, all those little screens and two distributors with guys playing off them.
Yeah,
they got
strike runners everywhere. Yeah,
exactly. They've got some wonderful pace, and they've got a solid enough set piece, so they want to strike off it.
Yeah,
that's what
that's going to be the mission for Checa, and maybe he can do it. He's got the credentials. He's got the pedigree. He's already got the year of them. You would hope. So good luck to him, and congratulations to the Pumas for appointing someone and managing to get that problem solved, because it was a little limbo they were in.
Absolutely. Second story, we have just this story again from a couple of weeks ago about the salary cap investigation into Leicester. They're ending up getting away with a fine, so they're going to have to pay not a small amount, either £309,000, nearly £310,000 in fines and taxes. But they've avoided a points deduction. They were over the salary cap,
which means it's probably fine. That is the threshold. If they had got a points deduction, then it wouldn't be fine. But the fact that they haven't means that it is now fine.
Well,
it is a fine. Like that, they're being fined, but they're fine with that.
I'm on the fence about the whole thing, I must say. 'Cause obviously, as a Leinster fan, we don't have a salary cap, and I'm not totally convinced about the merits of a salary cap.
No, neither am I.
Although I understand why in certain contexts
we don't have a salary cap in Leinster, but what they do have is like a limit to resources and a few rules that are around it. It's a different thing, but they do have like, you know, they're not going to fork out the same amount of money that certain marquee players can get in other places. So that's an obstacle that you have to navigate. That's not called a salary cap, but it's similar to it. So there are ways around it, as people will attest, and as we've been demonstrated. Like obviously the Saris thing, you have Wiggy 9 and all this. There's all manner of lazy ways around it that you can do. I'm not fully convinced of the merits of it in the context of the English game. It seems every other year there's someone flirting with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, the fact that Saracens got to such a level where they were winning Europe and they were the best team in Europe, and England correspondingly became class, like
got to a World Cup final.
The fact that it had to take them breaking the salary cap for that, it's like,
maybe
that was a good thing for English rugby.
Yes, it
though.
was.
Everything about that was good for English rugby. So you can call cheats and bat your fist as much as you want, but they built a hell of a team.
And when they were down in the doldrums, and when Exeter were taking up the mantle of best team in England for that brief time, the England national team didn't look as good for it, and the results reflected that. So it's up in the air as to whether it is or not. It is good or not. It is in place at the minute, so you need to be careful and mind your P's and Q's. And obviously they're getting away with a slap in the wrist, but They're still top of the table. They're still going to be in the finals. No points to
all is unchanged changed from a fan's perspective. And then just finally, before we wrap up, we have a few little bits of signing news, bit of player movement that we have to talk about. First of which, Tom O'Flaherty is actually going from Exeter to Sale. So Sale actually managed to pick up a player. They're not just losing everybody.
Hemorrhaging players, but they did manage to get an O'Flaherty.
Who's been useful one of the form players in the league over the last number of years. And that's like a whole half of Exeter's offense out the door.
Well,
so
certainly whenever they played, it is one of those stats, because they played us in that quarterfinal all those years, last year, or was it? Where he managed to beat 10 or 12 Leinster defenders, which was more than the rest of the team combined.
He did it in about 14 minutes as well.
It's true. No one tackled him. No one wanted to tackle him for the first wee while. It was very frustrating.
He's evasive.
He is a bit of a bar. So
Munster have some unfortunate news. 2 South Africans are gone with Van Gran. One of which, in Clute, is gone with Van Gran to Bath. He's going to join up with the coach, head off to Bath at the end of the year. And the other, which is Damien Dale Indy, the Springbok, to parts unknown. Apparently it's outside of Europe anyway, is going. So possibly back to South Africa or Japan.
China Am in Japan.
Yeah, Dale Indy and Am. They could put that centre partnership together.
Suddenly there are defensive chops in that top league. That top league. That's a loss. Those two are a loss to Munster for sure.
It's a complete rebuild for Munster, and they probably have to do away with that kind of pseudo South African identity and come up with a new one. They have history, but they don't need to be as sort of they're
blunt with it.
As sort of South Africa light as they are at the moment. It's not a great look for them, and it's not yielding trophies.
Results. No, that's true. So definitely a kind of a rebuilding moment for Munster, but we knew that even in the context of their coaching ticket mid-season. It's been a bit of a kind of transitional season for Munster. Then obviously Leinster, actually news relating to Leinster, we're linked with a potential signing of Charlie Nyatai, former All Black centre, which is pretty box office.
They're going back to their. I love this because the Leinster coaching ticket are going back to their roots and trying to get players from that class Chiefs side.
Yes,
Charlie Nyatai was one of the great players from that Chiefs side that was raided.
And look what James Lowe's done for us already.
Exactly. So get Charlie in there, get the band back together.
on the phone.
Exactly. We're getting the band back together in Dublin. I mean, listen, Leinster have a wealth of talent in the centres between young lads like Frawley and obviously Henshaw and Ringrose, but I still think there'll be a place for Charlie Nyatai, quality player.
Yeah, and he's a good offensive, instinctive kind of player. Yeah, no, he could it's not confirmed yet, but we'd welcome the signing of him. 31-year-old, pretty robust unit.
Player.
Would be available during the Six Nations time.
Yeah, although curiously the URC next year is going. To try at least in official schedules is not going to clash with any internationals for the whole regular season.
Interesting. It is still a very volatile league that's kind of figuring itself out, so it remains to be seen. But there could be a place for Charlie Nyatai in it.
I think there will doubtless be a place for Charlie Nyatai regardless of that. And then finally, just a bit of news regarding Melvin Jaminet. Apparently he's asked Perpignan to leave his contract early. He basically requested a release from the club.
Let me off this sinking ship.
He's not going to do another season in the Pro
De. Still hung over on champagne from his star-studded team that he's been with, Grandslam champs, and he has to rock back into Perpignan, and he's not fancying it anymore.
Well, his new destination.
To be fair, he owes them nothing. He's dragged them kicking and screaming up from the Pro De and managed to carve himself out an international career off the back of his undeniable talent and form. So money talks, and he's going to go for greener pastures, and he'll be an asset to anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. His new destination is not confirmed, but Toulouse are favourites to pick him up, and that's not a bad replacement for
linking up in fantasy dreamland going on. That Toulouse could be making reality
very real land pretty soon. Yeah, absolutely. But listen, that actually wraps up all the news that we have for you guys today, and it just about wraps up the show as well.
Indeed.
Listen, thanks so much for tuning in. We do appreciate it, and if you enjoyed the rugby chatter, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and if you've any thoughts or any opinions at all, please do drop them in the comments below. As we're saying,
stuff you'd like to see us talk about over the coming weeks, drop it down below. Any suggestions, any teams of the week improvements, all of that stuff, or team of the tournament stuff, all that down in the comments below. We do like to get a bit of active discourse going on, and thank you for everyone for listening to us during this campaign, both the Six Nations and the Rugby World Cup qualifiers, or Rugby Europe as well. We really enjoyed bringing you the rugby this year, and we're looking forward to bringing you more. And look out for us on audio platforms as well from the ensuing podcasts, because we're going to get that going too.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
Bye, folks.
We'll see you next week or at some point in the future.
That's right. Ciao.
Bye-bye.